Ready? Good morning. Oops, sorry. It's 9:04 a.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga. Here. Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harp Sheets.
Here.
Nystrom. Here. Phillips.
Here.
Scate. Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you, and quorum is established. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. I'm Leah Tate, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the in-person two-day meeting of the California Board of Psychology. We have a very full agenda, and the board is very happy you're here with us today. Our two-day meeting today will be webcast, but will not be available through WebEx. This is not a hybrid meeting. And some direction for this morning, we'll work through the agenda until no later than 10:15 a.m. We'll take a break and prepare for our hearing at that time. We've not been in person for a few years, so I just would like to remind everyone that you will see board members looking at computer screens throughout the meeting today and tomorrow. All of our board meeting materials are on the computer. The Board of Psychology has utilized technology to decrease the amount of paper that we utilize. And just to keep us focused, the mission of the Board of Psychology is to protect consumers of psychological services by licensing psychologists, regulate the practice of psychology, and support the evolution of the profession. Is there any board comment on the President's welcome? Thank you. Is there any public comment on the President's welcome? And if there is, please come forward and have a seat. Seeing none, we are moving on to public comment for items not on the agenda. This is agenda item number 3. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Before I invite speakers to come forward for public comment, I would ask individuals making comments to not discuss the specifics, including names, as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. This refers to current and pending complaints and possible future complaints. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to the members that is outside the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. While there may be a desire to engage in further discussion with comments presented during this time, the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Although this may give the impression we're not being responsive, these procedures are critical to ensure the compliance with the Open Meetings Act and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. In addition, if there is a speaker before you who expresses thoughts that are extremely similar to yours, please feel free to verbally agree with previous speakers instead of repeating the exact same comment. If you have a comment, please have a seat in front of the microphone, and each speaker will have 2 minutes, please. Are there any public comment at this time? Okay, sorry. I got excited. I do not see any public commenters at this time. We're going to take item number 5 before item number 4 this morning. And item number 5 is the President's report. Dr. Shakanda Rogers will be leading us in a mindfulness exercise this morning. Dr. Rogers, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tate. Before I begin, I just want to say how wonderful it is to see everyone in person. The last time I was in person was when I got sworn in February of 2020, and then the world shut down. So it's really nice to see all of you face to face, and nice to see all of you here today, too. So we'll start with a mindfulness practice. I've been thinking a lot about what kind of mindfulness exercise I wanted to do today. And one of my favorite practices is a loving kindness practice. It's been a really long couple of years, and there's been a lot of chaos and a lot of overwhelm and a lot of distress. And so I try to find pockets of groundedness when I can find it, and usually the way I can do that is by connecting to my breath. And so I'd like to offer a practice of loving kindness, which is also called a metta practice. It is the idea of offering yourself and others wishes for well-being. And I think in this time of difficulty, we can use all of the wishes for well-being we can get. So let's get started. You can find a position that's comfortable for you, keeping your eyes open or closing them if that feels available to you. And if that doesn't feel available, you can gently lower your gaze. What I love about the practice of mindfulness is that you can customize it based on whatever you need in the moment. So if you need a moment to just settle in, then this is your opportunity to do that. And I'll ring a gentle bell at the end of the practice. So settling in, finding a comfortable posture. My teacher often says, find a position that's upright but not uptight. So just letting gravity have its way with you. And settling the body. Softening any places of tension, holding, or tightness. And we're not trying to make anything happen, we're just allowing ourselves to be and to breathe. And we'll start by bringing attention to your chest, to your physical heart, or wherever it is that you feel kindness and compassion and connection in the body. For some people, that's the actual heart. For other folks, it might be in the belly. If it's helpful or supportive to you, you can place a hand on the chest or the belly or both. And really feeling into each breath, the inhale and the exhale, the inflow and the outflow of the breath. Continuing to let the body settle. And then just doing a gentle inquiry, noticing if the heart feels open or closed today. Does the heart feel overwhelmed? Does the heart feel settled? Or anything in between? And again, we check in, not in order to change anything, but just to know, just to bear witness to what's happening as we prepare for our meeting today. And the purpose of a loving kindness practice is to cultivate an open heart and having a friendlier stance toward ourselves and toward others. And if you're new to this practice, it might feel a little awkward, a little stilted. But with time, this practice really does open the heart. And bringing to mind one person that you feel a connection with, someone that has been supportive to you, someone who displays generosity, compassion, and kindness toward you. And if you have them in your mind's eye, you begin to start to send this person friendly wishes, or wishes for loving kindness. And the way the practice works is to offer them these wishes. I'll offer some phrases, and you can say them gently to yourself as you offer them to the person you've selected. May you be safe and protected from internal and external harm. May you be safe and well. May you be truly happy and deeply peaceful. May you have a life of ease. May you be content even during difficult times. If there is suffering, may you be soothed and may you be healed. And may you always be held in compassion. And may your heart be at peace. And just sitting with these warm wishes that you've offered to this person who's always been so kind and supportive to you. And sometimes it's easier to start with the metta practice by offering these well wishes to others. It serves as a good foundation for being able to turn these practices and offer these well wishes to yourself. So now we'll begin by offering loving kindness to ourselves. Repeating these phrases if they feel available for you. You can repeat them gently to yourself. May I be safe and well. May I be healthy and strong. May I be free from harm and danger. May I be supported. May I take good care of myself. May I have a life of ease. May I be content even during difficult times. If I am suffering, may my suffering be a kind teacher. May I be happy and deeply peaceful. May I be held in compassion. And may my heart be at peace. Allowing these words to settle into the heart, helping to settle the body. Finding a sense of ease and spaciousness. And returning our attention back to the breath. And when you're ready, opening your eyes and bringing your attention back into the room. Thank you for your practice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers. You have quite the knack for putting us into a very relaxed state for moving on towards tackling the very lengthy board agenda. So thank you for all of your wisdom for the past several meetings. Before moving on to the next agenda item, I want to make sure that everyone's aware that the calendar for the upcoming 2023 board meetings and committee meetings are in your agenda packet. Our next board meeting is scheduled for February 2nd and 3rd, 2023. This will be an in-person meeting held in Sacramento. Is there any board comment for agenda item number 5, the President's report? Is there any public comment for agenda item number 5? And if so, please come forward and have a seat, please. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 4. This is the Executive Officer's Report. Ms. Sorick, please.
Good morning. Included in your meeting materials is the Executive Officer's Report, and included in that report is a personnel update as well as the waiver update. Just wanted to report that we are fully staffed in the licensing unit, which is very exciting, and you'll hear more about that from Ms. Chung later on. We do have some vacancies that we are working to fill in the other units, and you'll hear more about that throughout the meeting as well. An update on the waivers, the governor declared that the emergency that was declared is scheduled to conclude on February 28th, 2023. So we currently have 3 active waivers, and those waivers are included in the meeting materials. And I'm available for any questions the Board of the Public may have.
Is there any board comment for the Executive Officer's Report? Any public comment for the Executive Officer's Report? If so, please come forward and have a seat. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6. This is the discussion on possible approval of the board meeting minutes from our August 19th, 2022 minutes. Looking for a possible motion.
So moved as with any technical amendments from board members.
Second.
Perfect. That was motion made by Mr. Fu, a second by Dr. Harb Sheets. Any board comment? Thank you. Any public comment for agenda item number 6?
Dr. Tate, I just had one comment. I believe it was item number 6. I think it says, I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I have a note that says that there was a delegation to Dr. Harpsheets and Dr. Cervantes. Or I think it says that there's a delegation to the licensing committee, and I believe my notes reflect that there was a delegation to Dr. Harpsheets and Dr. Cervantes with respect to...
The correspondence. The license correspondence.
Yes, the license correspondence. So that I just thought that you might want to correct the minutes to reflect that the delegation was not to the committee, but to Drs. Harpsheet and Cervantes.
Would that count as a technical amendment and be included in the motion that Mr. Fu has already made?
I'm not sure I would consider that technical. It is a difference of where the delegation was made, or to whom the delegation was made.
Okay, do I need an...
It's not, punctuation or something. So if you wanted to entertain a motion to modify the minutes or to amend or to approve the minutes as modified, as I've suggested. You can do that.
I'm happy to modify the motion to adopt the minutes as modified by the board's council.
I'll second the amended motion.
Thank you.
Where is the amendment? Like specifically in here? It's not item number 6.
It was item 9D. From my notes, it says item 9D from the minutes of August.
Thank you so much.
I don't have the specific lines at the moment. Dr. Phillips, would you like me to find which line it was? Or which page and line?
Dr. Phillips, were you able to find the amendment?
I don't see agenda item 9B.
Okay, I'm,
9D.
Oh, D.
yeah, it was
don't
item
see D.
9D. Item 9D, I'm just looking to see what page and lines it was.
Starts at line 192.
Thank you. That helps. That's great.
Yes.
Okay, then. Thank you.
So I have a modified motion by Mr. Fu, second by Dr. Harb Sheets. I'll bring it back. Board comment on this modified motion? Any public comment? This is agenda item number 6, possible approval of the board meeting minutes from August 19, 2022. Okay. Seeing no public comment, Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harb Sheets.
Aye.
Nystrom. Aye. Phillips.
Aye.
Frescate. Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 7. This is the Department of Consumer Affairs update. Mr. Glass-Steagall, please.
Well, good morning. My name is Judy Bucciarelli, and I'm working in the executive office.
Ms. Pucciarelli, can you put the microphone closer to your,
Right there.
that much better. Thank you so much.
Hey, I've spoken in this room before, but not on microphone. Thank you. My name is Judy Bucciarelli, and I am working in the executive office for Board and Bureau Relations, and I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide the Department of Consumer Affairs update today. So I'm going to touch on some different topics here, and I'm sorry if it seems kind of robotic, but it is a scripted update, so I'm just going to move through it. First, we'll talk about new DCA staff. We are very excited to announce that the governor recently appointed leaders to DCA's Board and Bureau Relations team. Melissa Gear is serving as DCA's new Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, and she joined the department on October 3rd. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to DCA. She previously served as the Chief Deputy Legislative Director at the Department of Insurance since 2014, and she has also served at the California State Teachers Retirement System, California Attorney General's Office, and the Legislative Analyst's Office. Beginning November 14th, Yvonne Durantes will serve as the new Assistant Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations. She has been serving as a Senior Emergency Services Coordinator at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services since 2022 and a Policy Analyst and Task Force Coordinator since 2019. She was an executive fellow at Cal OES from 2018 to 2019, and we are very excited to have these new BBR team in place to serve and assist our boards and bureaus. DCA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee. Director Kimberly Kirchmeier established the department's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee to guide the department in its equity strategy, initiatives, and action plans. The DEI Committee held its first kickoff meeting on November 9th, 2022. Strategic planning. In accordance with Governor Gavin Newsom's executive order, strategic plans in effect July 2023 and beyond must be developed or updated to more effectively advance equity and drive outcomes that increase opportunity for all. In response, DCA is revising its strategic planning processes to incorporate more inclusive public engagement, data analysis, and embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the strategic planning process. Over the coming months, the DEI Committee will inform the strategic planning processes. By March 2023, DCA will begin implementing the revised processes and working with the boards in updating existing strategic plans or developing new strategic plans. Our Promise campaign. It's that time of year again, and DCA is excited to take part in Our Promise, California State Employees Giving at Work once more, and celebrate 65 years of caring for California. This year's Our Promise Vice Chair is Lourdes Castro Ramirez, Secretary of the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, and our DCA Our Promise co-chairs are Chief Deputy Director Christine Lally and Deputy Director Melissa Gear. The campaign began on October 1st and will end on December 31st. The campaign allows Californians to donate to a nonprofit or nonprofits of their choice. With your assistance, DCA hopes to continue its tradition of generosity and caring for our communities through this year's campaign. Please assist us in spreading the word and encouraging all members and staff to make a one-time donation or donate online through Cal Employee Connect. California can be cared for as little as $5 per month. In-person meeting guidelines and COVID-19 safety measures. Though legislation has passed allowing remote meetings through June 30th, 2023, we are reminding boards that choose to hold in-person meetings of the safety measures, best practices, and recommendations for holding public meetings. When planning for upcoming meetings, please remember all board, bureau members, and staff are expected to follow the state and local public health guidelines that apply in the area where meetings are held. CDPH released updated guidance for the use of face masks. Please refer to the guidance ahead of the meetings to determine the appropriate masking approach for your meeting. If masks are recommended for your meeting location, please post face covering guidance signage at your meeting check-in or entrance. Board member travel. As travel begins to pick up, it is important to remember that state travel arrangements must be made through DCA's approved travel agency, Cal Travel Store, or Concur. All board, bureau members, and staff must use the most economical fares possible when traveling by air on official state business. Typically, this will be the Southwest Wanna Get Away option. However, there may be additional charges if changes are made to the flight. Flight changes to the date and time for personal convenience are not approved, and the traveler will be responsible for any associated charges. Additionally, AB 1887 prohibits state agencies, departments, boards, authorities, and commissions from traveling to states that are subject to California's travel ban. There are now 23 prohibited states, and the entire list of states can be viewed on the website of the Attorney General. Partnership with State Controller's Office. DCA will partner with the State Controller's Office to share information with consumers and certain licensees about the Unclaimed Property Program. State law requires banks, insurance companies, corporations, and other entities to report and submit their customers' property to SCO after a period of inactivity, generally 3 years. Certain DCA licensees will benefit from this partnership as it will educate them about their responsibility to report unclaimed property and assist with compliance. Additionally, the program is a great resource for all consumers to locate their unclaimed property. As always, DCA is here to help, and if there is anything we can do to assist, please reach out to Melissa Gear, Chief Deputy of Board and Bureau of Relations. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you, Ms. Bucciarelli. Any board comment regarding our DCA update? Oh, Mr. Fu?
Thanks for making the time to join us this morning. It's our first in-person meeting in a long time, so this is wonderful. I'm curious to hear if there's anything the board should be preparing for in light of the expected $25 billion shortfall in the upcoming budget.
Okay, so I'm not in the position to answer that question, and if you would like to have the executive officer reach out to Melissa Gear, and she can pose that question to her and get back to you with an answer on that.
That's really helpful. I know our board wants to reflect the fiscal prudence that the entire state is taking, just as your presentation alluded to with regard to airfares. And so with as much lead time as possible when it comes to understanding what the economic forecast is, it's helpful for us as a board to make sure that we're appropriately making the right decisions to reflect that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board comment? And I do believe we have a longer budget report coming within the next 2 board meetings. So thank you for highlighting that. Any other board comment? I don't see any public comment from Ms. Bucciarelli. If you have public comment, please come forward. I don't see any movement. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Ms.
you're
Bucciarelli,
welcome.
for
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you. We're moving on to the budget report. Mr. Glass-Steagall.
Good morning, board members. Included in your meeting materials for agenda item 8 is the budget report. In the governor's 22-23 fiscal year budget, the board has an appropriation of $7,653,000. When fiscal year 2022-23 closes, the board is estimated to revert 4.92% of its budget, or $376,176. Also included in the meeting materials is the budget report through fiscal month 2, which is August of 2022, a fund condition statement, which everyone was provided with a hand carry to reflect the fund condition through fiscal month 2, along with the projected versus actual expenditures and revenue, which is in the meeting materials. With me today is Karen Munoz and Camilio Branch from the Department of Consumer Affairs Budget Office, who are available to provide more information regarding the board's budget. We are planning, as previously stated, to have a more in-depth budget meeting at the February 2023 board meeting. And before Ms. Munoz and Mr. Branch join me up here, just wanted to make sure it is stated that we are still expected to be insolvent in fiscal year 24-25. So we are still advancing our plan to adjust our fees accordingly to stay fiscally solvent. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall. Any board comment? Questions? Mr. Fu?
Apologies, Madam President.
Not a problem.
But when it comes to the budget, it's a sensitive
know.
topic.
We need you here.
Dr. Phillips might agree with me about the sensitivity of budgets. Jason, Mr. Glass-Steagall, I'm really curious. In the past, there's been a difficulty in receiving timely information with regard to a potential reversion to our fund or potential deficit within the current fiscal year. Could you provide a status update on the information flows with regard to our ability to respond appropriately to that?
Absolutely. The Department of Consumer Affairs has been doing an excellent job recently in providing us with timely information and being very open to communication regarding our budget, our current budget scenario.
So related to my question to Ms. Putrelli earlier, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name, in terms of the expectation of a potential budget deficit next year, which I think is $25 billion according to the LAO, what's the communication process like from DCA to the board over the next fiscal year and in expectation of planning for the 23-24 fiscal year?
I will also defer to Ms. Munoz, but generally any changes made are directed from the budget office through to the boards, but we haven't heard anything at this time.
And one final question related to this issue is our revenues are not general fund, and I think what I've been talking about is the general fund. So what's the expectation that as a special fund we would have to take on any cuts out of a sense of solidarity with the general fund?
From my experience, there is no special or different treatment from special funds versus general fund programs. Any cuts or changes to our program or any program that the general fund programs are required to do, like a percentage of income reduction or pay reduction, would also apply to special fund programs as well.
And so while we may be in a place where there's I think 3.1 reserves for next year because the fees are coming in okay, we'll still be taking potentially program cuts in alignment with general fund dollars. Does that change the calculation for which the reserve period is available to us?
It probably would, but I don't assume it would be a great number depending on the percentages. I mean, in last COVID cuts was 9.23, I believe, % per employee, and I don't know how many months that added into our reserves, but I don't think it was a noticeable change.
So the expectation is we'll move forward with potentially seeking to address the fund imbalance in future fiscal years.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your expertise, Mr. Fu. I appreciate that. Any other board comment? Dr. Phillips.
So in 2021-22, we transferred money into the general fund, despite the fact that we're running into deficit conditions. I know we have no control over that, nor does DCA have any control over whether that's taken. Are we anticipating more money is going to be transferred out of our fund?
Okay, this is not working. Oh, I'm on already. Sorry. Hi, Karen Munoz, Budget Manager for DCA. So you guys had I believe it was a $900,000 loan to the general fund that is expected to come back to the board's fund this fiscal year, 22-23, with about a $24,000 interest as well. So that is expected to come in. If there are needs for additional general fund loans, we do look at every board's current structure. And if the board is in a deficit, there's usually not an impact to the board. We will not be transferring additional funds to the general fund at that time.
Thank you very much.
Any other board comment? Thank you for the question, Dr. Phillips. Okay. Seeing none, is there any public comment regarding the budget report? If so, please come forward and probably take Mr. Glass-Spiegel's seat. I don't see any movement. Thank you very much for coming to our meeting and answering our questions. Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a presentation for us as well? We did. Oh, here we go.
All right, good morning. My name is Camilo Branch. I'm a budget analyst with the DCA Budget Office, and I'm here to give an overview of your expenditure projection report as well as your fund condition and answer any questions regarding those.
Could you get closer to your microphone,
yeah.
please?
Is that better? Great. Okay. All right, so please refer to page 12 and 13 of your board meeting materials. These are documents that I'll be discussing. Starting on page 12, starting with the board's expenditure projections. For some clarity, when reviewing this report, you'll have the top half is going to be your personal services, and the bottom half being your operating expenses and equipment. The green columns are going to be your prior year actuals for 21-22. The blue column is the board's current year 22-23 budget, year-to-date expenditures, and the orange column is going to be the projections to the end of the year. As we focus on the bottom of the document, you'll see that the board has an appropriation of just over $7.6 million and is projected to spend $7.2 million, creating a reversion to the board's fund of just over $376,000 or almost 5%. The expenditure projection may change throughout the fiscal year based on unanticipated board needs. The budget office will continue to monitor these expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as future months close. Moving on to the next document will be the board's fund condition statement, which is, I believe, been updated and handed to you. As a reminder, we read this from top to bottom, left to right, and going into a little bit more detail for clarity. On the left column is the board's prior year 21-22 actuals. It shows the board began 21-22 with an adjusted beginning balance of $8.8 million, collected close to $4.6 million in revenue, and expended approximately $6.3 million in expenditures, plus an additional $442,000 in direct draws from the fund to support statewide expenses such as supplemental pension payments and statewide pro rata, for a total expense of just over $6.7 million. The board ended 21-22 with approximately $6.3 million in reserve balance, or about 9.7 months in reserve. Months in reserve being how the board can continue normal operations without any incoming revenues. That $6.3 million reserve then moves up to the top of the next column of the fund condition and becomes the beginning balance for current year 22-23. For the current year, the board projects an estimate of $5.6 million in revenue. The fund will receive the scheduled $924,000 of general fund loan repayment, including $24,000 of interest. The board's current year expenditures as of month 2 are projected to be approximately $7.3 million, with an additional direct fund cost of approximately $600,000 for a total projected expenditure of $7.8 million. The board's fund is projected in imbalance with negative reserves by the end of 24-25. This does not include the proposed statutory fee increase, which was previously approved by the board and will be proposed in the upcoming legislative session. But the proposed changes are projected to increase revenues by $2.9 million to $6 million per year. The Budget Office will continue to monitor the board's revenues and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as we begin closing fiscal months in the current fiscal year. Additionally, the Budget Office is currently working on current year and budget year incremental adjustments through the fall budget process, and we'll update these projections as we get closer to the governor's budget, which is in January. All right, and this is just a snapshot in time, so things can change month to month or as things come up. This is also a conservative projection with revenues staying flat, not increasing at all, but your expenditures increasing 3% each year. And with that, I open it for any questions or comments you may have.
Thanks again. Let's try this again. Any board comment for our DCA representatives? Questions for? Oh, Mr. Fu.
It'll be brief, I think. Is this the report that we're seeing from Fiscal, and what's the status update on DCA's transition to the Fiscal program with relation to us receiving timely information about where our budget is between budgeted versus actuals?
I believe, are we already?
Yeah, we're pretty close to closing our months at a timely manner. So normally when we close fiscal month, say, for example, say September, July, August, fiscal month 3, we'll get the information sometime mid-October, and then we'll be able to push out reports, projections within about 2 weeks. At the end of fiscal years, it does take a couple months to close, but we have caught up pretty much. It takes a couple months. With the new fiscal system, if we're off by $1, we can't close a month. But it doesn't change or stop the process. So we are still working in every month. We just can't close them until a month does close. So even if we are held up on 1 month, doesn't mean that the next month we can't catch up and close it pretty fast, because it is still moving. But the systems are becoming a little bit more easier to manage and navigate through. But the documents, the projection document you're looking at, that is part of our Qubit report, one of the reports that the department has pushed through. So that is something that we are sharing with you guys as we close the months with the board.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
So I'm assuming that this document does not include our fee increase that we just passed?
It does not.
Okay. So in the presentation in February, do you think we can have those numbers included in a report, a projected report, perhaps, just so we can see?
Perhaps. I believe it still needs to pass through the legislative process.
I believe we have an estimate of what we're expecting to come in, so we can include that as an example of what we anticipate should it go through the legislature and
That would be
become
great.
effective. I believe it's January 2024.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you so much. Any other board comment? Ms. Sor, do I see? Oh, Dr. Harp Sheets.
Did I just hear you give an approximate number of what we would anticipate with the approved fee increases for next year? Did you say 2 million or?
That would be an approximate increase of those amounts. So it could increase up to 6 million, but at a minimum 2.9.
Of 2 million?
Yeah.
Okay, so it gives us kind of a general idea to add into these numbers.
Yes.
Thanks.
Ms. Orick.
And just as kind of a check-in for those that are following on the webcast and with us in the audience today, the board has been in discussions about our fee imbalance. And so we are tackling it from 2 different angles. The first step was a regulatory change, which became effective July 1. So I believe, Ms. Munoz, that information is included in the projections because those are actual numbers that are coming in now.
Correct.
But, and Dr. Tate was asking if perhaps we could add an additional document with some projected fund balance if the fee increase legislation is approved, so that we have an idea of the actuals versus projected if the legislation passes.
Yes.
And then one quick other thing I just wanted to mention to the board members that in my EO monthly reports that you guys get on a monthly basis, the budget update comes from Mr. Branch. So at least that's a way we can attempt to monitor it on a monthly basis, what we're looking at as far as projected months in reserve and what that revenue looks like. So I just wanted to thank Mr. Branch for that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. Any other board comments or questions at this time? Let me open up public comment. If you have questions or a comment, can you please step forward? I'm seeing no movement. thank you for the second time for coming and presenting. Appreciate it, and look forward to hearing more in February. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall. Moving on to the enforcement report with Ms. Monterrubio.
Good morning. It's so nice to see all of you. So the enforcement report is agenda item 9, and attached with my report, you will see the overview of enforcement activity, conveying complaint, investigation, and discipline statistics to date for the current fiscal year. When this report was written, we had 3 vacancies. However, one of those positions has been filled, and our new hire will begin on Monday, the 21st. One of the 2 vacancies will not be filled because that employee is on leave and will be returning in February. So that leaves us with 1 vacancy, and we have made an offer to a very well-qualified candidate, and hopefully they will begin employment with us mid to end of December. So we're excited to have a full team, hopefully by the end of December. Current staff has done a great job trying to cover the 3 vacancies, making sure that we're responsive to stakeholders and that we are prioritizing our complaints so that cases with the most egregious violations can be handled first. So we have received, since July 1st, 290 complaints, and all complaints are opened and assigned to an analyst. Since July 1st, we have issued 3 enforcement citations. We have referred 14 cases to the Office of the Attorney General for formal discipline, and we are currently monitoring 49 active probationers, and of the 49 probationers, 2 are out of compliance, and we have 19 told probationers. Attached again to my report is the overview of enforcement activity, so if there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Ms. Monterrubio, and congratulations on getting fully staffed by December.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Any board comment regarding the enforcement report? Okay, no board comment. Any public comment regarding the enforcement report? If you have questions or comments, please step forward and have a seat. I'm seeing no movement. Thank you, Ms.
You're
Monterrubio.
welcome.
Appreciate it, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 10 is the licensing unit report. Ms. Chung, please.
Good morning, board members. Very good to see you. We are excited to report that the licensing unit is now fully staffed. We recently onboarded 3 additional staff, Jason Lin as our newest licensing analyst, Kelly Okuma rejoining the board as a retired Newton, assisting with our applications. And most recently, we have Kenny Trang joining us as a licensing technician to help with administrative duties on October 26th last month. So we are very excited that we're now fully staffed. Following that would be a brief update. As part of the continual effort to enhance the services provided to our applicants, we have been working with the Breeze team in building an online application for the law and ethics exam. So this online application will allow applicants to apply online through their Breeze account and make payment regarding their law and ethics examination fee. We anticipate this online application to be launched at sometime in the fall next year. Regarding statistics for licensing populations, as of October 24th, we have 22,501 licensed psychologists and 1,668 registered psychological associates. It includes 1994 947 current psychologists and 2554 psychologists who are in the inactive status. You may find more details in Attachment A, the licensing population report. This report provides a snapshot of the number of psychologists and psychological associates in each status at the time the report was generated. By comparing to the last report made at the August board meeting, the number of psychologists who hold a current license has increased by 173, and the number of current psychological associates has increased by about 100. Regarding application workload, in Attachment B, you'll find them for both psychologist license and that for psychological associate registration applications, ranging from April this year through September. We have observed an increase in the months of June, July, and August for the applications. The board speculates this increase is due to graduating season and individuals are ready to accrue hours or begin with the licensure process. It also means that more applications are being worked on as we approve their examination eligibility or registration. In Attachment C, talking about the applications and notifications received, the number that we received provided on a 12-month period from October 2021 through September 2022. So this number shows an overall increase of about 500 applications and notifications received compared to the same 12 period as reported in the year of 2020 and 2021. In Attachment D for examination statistics, it provides a 12-month period data for the total number of candidates and first-timers who have taken the EHRBP or the law and ethics exams, the complete and the passing rate. Candidates who took the EHRBP for the first time in September this year shows a little lower percentage of passing rate compared to previous months, but the passing percentage rate has increased slightly for the complete in the same month. And Attachment B, E, it talks about the average application processing times. So the board reviews and processes the applications based on a first-come, first-served basis. This includes, but not limited to, all applications, supporting materials, and responses to application deficiencies. They're all reviewed according to the date that they are received. So this 6-month overview provided in Attachment D is about the average processing time frames in business days. With the implementation of short-term and long-term solutions, which were presented to the board at the August board meeting in addressing the average processing time frames, we continue to observe a decreasing trend in the average processing timeframes for psychologist application and the notification and supporting documents review process for psychological associate application. So for example, the most recent month in October, it takes us about under 30 business days to process psychologist applications and requests as compared to over 60 months reported in May. And I would like to thank staff for their dedication and hard work to shorten the average processing time frames, and we are hopeful to maintain these improved time frames as we continue to implement the identified long-term and short-term solutions. This concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions that you may have for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Chung, and thank you so much for working on those short-term and long-term solutions and sticking with us the past several months. I know it's been very stressful for you and your team, and congratulations for staffing your team. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
Any board comment for Ms. Chung? Dr. Harb-Sheets?
Yeah, I just wanted to also acknowledge and thank really the entire board staff, because I know different units have had to make changes also, and especially the licensing unit, because I could see the openness in which they, excuse me, all worked with this, and that was impressive to me. There was no defensiveness, and excuse me, and thank you.
Any other board comment this time? And Ms. Sork just reminded me we will be discussing the timeframes more in depth later in the agenda. Dr. Cervantes.
I just want to echo Dr. Harpsheets. Ms. Chung and her team have been extraordinary in analyzing the circumstances, the whole of the situation with the licensing and the backlog and the different things that they've had to navigate, including getting to this point where they're fully staffed. And I had an opportunity to talk to the staff. Maybe it was maybe like a year and a half ago, to share some insight about the process of going through doctoral studies in psychology, and to help understand some of what applicants may be navigating as they're starting to encounter our board. They were very open, and I am pleased and in awe of how far we've come to this point. There's other materials in our packet that reflects a lot of feedback and a lot of careful thought. And I think it's just an enormous, I want to thank Ms. Chung for the enormous lift from our last meeting to today to get us to this point. I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cervantes.
Any other board comment at this time? Okay, I'm gonna, hi, Dr. Kasuga.
It's just really brief. I do appreciate the attachment E information, and I was really amazed with how much shorter the processing times have been reduced to. In some of the cases, it's as much as a third of the time. So what has been the most critical in the improvements?
I think what really helps is the identified short-term and long-term solutions that the board management staff and the licensing unit staff has put together. So that really significantly help us, guide us what we need to do, take the necessary steps to shorten our time frame.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations! I'm really impressed with some of the implemented changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga.
Any other board comment? Okay, let's open it up for public comment. If you have public comment for Ms. Chung, can you please step forward and have a seat? I'm seeing no movement. So thank you, Ms. Chung, and I look forward to having you back tomorrow for agenda item number 21, the long-term and short-term solutions. Thank you. We're moving on to the Continuing Education and Renewals Program Report. Ms. McCochran.
Hi, good morning. So for CE, the pass rate for 2022 is 73%. The pass rate from 2017 to 2021 has been consistently over 80%. And the pass rate for second audits has been over 80% since 2017, with a 100% pass rate in 2021 and 2022. For renewals, between January 2022 through July 2022, 83% of psychologists renewed as active, and approximately 90% of psychologists and psychological associates are renewing their license through Breeze. This concludes my CE and renewals report, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. McCochran. Any board comment? Oh, hello, Ms. Nystrom. Go ahead.
Ms. Parkman, with 26% of psychologists failing the CE audit, that seems concerning. Is there information that has been shared with you to have an idea of why psychologists are failing their CE audit at such a high rate?
Yeah, so attachment C shows the reasons for not passing the CE audit, and the main reason is that they're short hours. The excuses or provided by the psychologists are either they miscalculated or because of COVID, they thought that the 9 live hour requirement wasn't required anymore, so they just did 27 hours instead.
Okay, and so then do we expect, well, 26 is normally higher. Okay, it'll be interesting to see how the future out years improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nystrom. Any other board comment for Ms. McCochran? Hands. Let's open that up for public comment, please. If anyone has a comment or question for Ms. McCochran, please step forward and have a seat. I do not see any movement towards this direction. Thank you, Ms. McCochran. I appreciate it. At this time, we'll be taking a 20-minute break. We will promptly resume for a petition hearing at 10:30. Thank you so much.
Okay. You ready? This is me? Yeah, that's on. All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. We are on the record, and we are here to review 4 petitions for early termination of probation or reinstatement. The cases we intend to hear today, they're staggered, but I generally will describe all the cases at the beginning, or at least by name. We have the case of Dr. Roberto Francis, Dr. Carol Davis, Dr. Lita Maria Grayson, and Dr. Sheila Shalati, is what I understand the pronunciation to be. These matters are being heard before the Board of Psychology. Will all the members of the board please identify themselves for the record? We can start from the left and go to right. That's it.
Dr. Shell Kasuga, board member.
Julie Nystrom, board member.
Dr. Stephen Phillips, board member.
Dr. Leah Tate, board president.
Seiran Fu, board vice president.
Dr. Shakanda Rogers, board member.
Dr. Marisela Cervantes, board member.
Dr. Mary Harb Sheets, board member.
Your microphone's not on, I don't believe. Or I didn't hear you.
Ana Descate, board member.
Okay, thank you very much. It appears we have a quorum. My name is Ed Washington. I'm an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I've been assigned to hear this matter. I'm sorry, I'm going to ignore all the computer issues here and just keep moving. We're going to call each matter independently. This morning, we're scheduled to hear the Dr. Roberto Francis matter at 10:30. We are running a little behind schedule, but I think we have sufficient time. This matter was scheduled to be heard with the use of a court reporter. However, no court reporter is available. It is my understanding that the petitioner is willing to proceed utilizing electronic recording. Is that the case, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Then I'm going to call this matter specifically. Item number 1, in the matter of the petition for early termination of probation of Roberto Francis, OEH number 2022-100191. The agency number for this matter is 600-2021-000-638. May I have the appearance of the Deputy Attorney General, please?
Good morning, Ryan Yates, appearing before for the Office of Attorney General.
Thank you. And may I have the appearance of the petitioner and his counsel?
Robert Francis, petitioner.
All right, thank you very much.
Amit Singh of Rothschild Wissahickon Sands on behalf of Dr. Francis.
Excellent. Thank you. And so generally, in terms of how we proceed, I would provide instructions to the petitioner if he was a self-represented litigant, but I assume, Mr. Quinn, you've explained to him how we will proceed this morning?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes? Okay. And if we are ready to begin, then I'll take the background information from the Deputy Attorney General.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Deputy Attorney General Ryan Yates. I am appearing on behalf of the Attorney General and people of the state of California. I am here to assist the panel in this hearing. My role is not adversarial, but is intended to protect the public interest and to ensure that the panel has adequate information to make an informed decision. I now ask that exhibits 1 through 14 be identified in the exhibit index and marked and entered into evidence.
All right, is there any objection to those exhibits being marked and entered into evidence?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibits 1 through 14 have been admitted.
All right. Would you like me to read them in, or can we move past that?
You can describe them briefly.
Okay. Exhibit 1 is the certificate of licensure at AGO 01. Exhibit 2 is the statement of issues number 6002014-000-299 at AGO 2. Exhibit 3, decision 600-2014-000-999, dated 5/13/2015. That's at AGO 9. Exhibit 4 is the decision and order, number 600-2018-00-1075, dated 6/1/2019. That's at AGO 16. Exhibit 5 is a modified citation dated 6/4/2020 at AGO 42. Exhibit 6 is the petition for early termination of probation at AGO 44. Exhibit 7, narrative statement of Robert Francis at AGO 73. Exhibit 8, psychological evaluation at AGO 78. Exhibit 9, letters of support at AGO 86. Exhibit 10 is a work letter offer at AGO 109. Exhibit 11, a certificate of successful completion at AGO 116. Exhibit 12, modified citation order and probation report, which is redacted at AGO 121. Exhibit 13, the probation profile at AGO 128. And Exhibit 14 was the previous notice of hearing at AGO 276.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So moving along to the history of this matter, Dr. Roberto, who is better known as Robert Francis, has petitioned for early termination of the probation of his California psychologist license, number 30990, which was originally issued on June 1st, 2019. Petitioner is currently serving a probationary period of 7 years probation effective June 1st, 2019. Now, starting out by summarizing the background of this matter, petitioner received his bachelor's degree in 2007. He received his master's degree in forensic psychology in 2010, and he received his doctorate of psychology in spring of 2015. Petitioner has worked at the Psychiatric Care Center in Redding, California since 2018. He has worked there as a psychologist since receiving his license in 2019. The licensing discipline stems from some criminal prior convictions. So I'm going to summarize sort of everything together because the licensing and history sort of merges together in this matter. So on May 7th, 2007, petitioner was convicted in the Superior Court of California, County of Shasta, for violating Vehicle Code Section 23152H, driving under the influence of alcohol. His blood alcohol content at the time was 0.13%, and petitioner was charged with a misdemeanor, to which he pled no contest. Petitioner, among other requirements, was required to attend a 9-month alcohol treatment program. Based on my review of the materials, the program was not completed. On June 1st, 2007, petitioner was convicted in the Superior Court of California, County of Shasta, for violating Penal Code Section 415, Subdivision I, fighting in a public place, a misdemeanor. At the time of these convictions, petitioner was 22 years old. On November 1st, 2008, petitioner was arrested in Santa Barbara, California, after driving through a DUI checkpoint and blowing a .11% BAC. On December 15th, 2008, petitioner pled no contest to the charges and was convicted of a misdemeanor. Since this was his second DUI offense, petitioner was given 30 days in jail and 3 years probation, fines, and a driver's license suspension for 3 years. Immediately following the December 15th, 2008 conviction, petitioner left the courthouse, drove his vehicle, and was arrested for driving with a suspended license. On February 25th, 2009, petitioner pled no contest to the charges and was convicted of violating California Vehicle Code Section 14601.2A, driving with a suspended license following a conviction for driving under the influence. On or about January 29th, 2011, petitioner was again arrested for driving with a suspended license. On March 25th, 2011, petitioner pled guilty to violating California Vehicle Code Section 14601.2A, driving with a suspended license, following a conviction for driving under the influence of alcohol. The court sentenced petitioner to 30 days in jail and 1 year probation, fines, and ordered him not to drive in possession of a valid driver's license. So following these convictions, on February 9th, 2014, petitioner submitted an application for a psychological assistant registration and certified under penalty of perjury that the contents of his application for registration as a psychological assistant were true and correct. In the section of the application titled Conviction, License, Disciplinary Action, petitioner checked yes as his response to a question asking if he had, quote, ever been convicted of or pled guilty or nolo contender to any violation of any federal or state statute. This includes all misdemeanors and felony convictions. This is followed by a submission of what's called a disciplinary action form. Petitioner submitted forms disclosing some of his criminal convictions, but failed to submit a conviction license disciplinary action form for his June 11, 2007 conviction for violating Penal Code Section 415.1, fighting. Petitioner likewise omitted any mention of his June 11, 2007 conviction for fighting. On April 29th, 2014, the board denied petitioner's application. Petitioner then sought a hearing to contest the denial. On May 13th, 2015, the board issued a decision, effective June 12th, 2015, in which the denial of petitioner's license was sustained. On or about June 10th, 2016, petitioner reapplied for a physician's assistant registration. Petitioner certified under penalty of perjury that the contents of his second application for registration as a psychological assistant was true and correct. As part of the required application questionnaire, the following question was answered, quote, have you ever been convicted of or pled guilty or nolo contender to any criminal or civil offense in the United States, its territories, or foreign country? This includes every citation or infraction, including traffic violations resulting in fines more than $500, misdemeanor and or felony. If yes, complete the conviction license disciplinary action form, end quote. Under penalty of perjury, petitioner answered no to this question and included no conviction/license disciplinary action forms with his application. On or about June 22nd, 2016, the board denied petitioner's application. Petitioner did not petition for a hearing on said denial. Following an initial review of the application submitted by petitioner, the board asked petitioner for an explanation of his response to that question. On or about July 1st, 2016, petitioner submitted a letter to the board in which he stated that he had been convicted of 3 criminal offenses, and he included a conviction license disciplinary action form for each of those offenses. Petitioner again failed to submit a convictions license disciplinary action form for or otherwise disclose the February 25th, 2009 and March 25th, 2011 convictions for driving with a suspended license. So that leads us to why we're here today. Board of Psychology license number 30990. On September 15th, 2017, petitioner submitted an application to the board for a psychologist license. The application contained what appears to be the correct answers regarding his conviction information. It also contained what appears to be the correct conviction license disciplinary forms for each of those convictions. Nonetheless, the board, based on the prior convictions and prior omissions in the previous applications, on October 4th, 2018, the board denied the application. Petitioner requested an administrative hearing. The board filed a statement of issues number 600-2018-001075 against petitioner on December 28th, 2018. The statement of issues charged petitioner with having been convicted of 5 misdemeanors, the 2 DUIs, fighting, and 2 convictions for driving with a suspended license. In addition, the statement of issues charged petitioner with dishonesty in his 2014 and 2016 applications for registration as a psychological assistant. Prior to the commencement of an OAH hearing on the statement of issues, the parties executed a stipulated settlement. The stipulation provided the following: issuance of a probationary license conditional on completion of 7 years probation, psychological evaluation, and, if appropriate, ongoing therapy, abstain from drugs and alcohol, and submit to tests and samples. And the testing frequency for that was 36 to 104 tests per year for year 1 of probation, and 24 tests for the following years of probation. And then that was followed by standard terms and conditions. Petitioner and petitioner's counsel both signed the agreement, indicated that they discussed and understood and agreed to be bound by the terms. The stipulation was adopted by the board and became effective on June 1st, 2019. Regarding petitioner's probation, of note, on June 4th, 2020, the board issued a citation number 600-2020-00260 to petitioner. The cause for citation stated the petitioner violated Condition 2 of the probation order, submitting to drug and alcohol tests and samples, and stated that on March 6th, April 16th, and April 22nd, 2020, petitioner checked in with his drug testing vendor, FSS Solutions, but failed to submit to testing on those dates. Additionally, the citation stated that petitioner failed to check in with FSS as required on April 15th and May 11th, 2020. Petitioner was additionally charged with a fine of $750. Regarding probation compliance, per petitioner's probation report, petitioner is currently in compliance with all terms. Regarding past compliance, according to the probation report dated December 9th, 2021, Exhibit 13, starting at AGO 124, petitioner has been in compliance with all terms except for the following. On September 24th, 2019, a violation notice was issued for violation of probation. Conditions 2, which is to abstain from drugs and alcohol and submit to tests and samples. And Condition 8, quarterly reports. And Condition 9, probation compliance. On March 9th, 2020, a violation was issued for violation of probation Conditions 2 and 9. On April 27th, 2020, a violation notice was issued for violation of probation Conditions 2 and 9. On May 1st, 2020, a violation notice was issued for violation of probation Conditions 2 and 9. On May 14th, 2020, a violation notice was issued for violation of probation Conditions 2 and 9. On September 16th, 2020, a violation notice was issued for violation of probation Conditions 2 and 9. And on April 27th, 2022, a violation notice was issued for violation of probation Conditions 2 and 9. Now, as stated earlier, on July 2nd, 2021, petitioner petitioned for early termination of his probation. So that brings us why we're all here. I believe that accurately summarizes the matter as of today's date. As this is a petition for penalty relief, it is petitioner's burden to demonstrate that he is rehabilitated by clear and convincing evidence. Therefore, I have nothing further at this time, but I do reserve the right to cross-examination of petitioner or call him as a witness if he does not choose to testify before making my recommendation. And with that, we rest for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Yates. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you, and I'm going to
Your
make a brief
presentation of the
opening
petition.
statement and then begin my questioning of Dr. Francis.
Okay.
Thank you. As Deputy AG Yates mentioned in his discussion or summary of the case, the probation report and summary at Exhibits 12 and 13 do confirm that Dr. Francis is in compliance with the conditions of his probation. There are a few violations, which he will, of course, address in his testimony here today, and all of which involve failures to check in and a couple failures to test. Since he began probation just about 3.5 years ago now, he has never tested positive for alcohol or any other substance. An important consideration when his probation conditions are strictly designed at this point to check in, to test, and then test when directed. He's halfway through his probation, and the petition materials introduced as evidence already and his testimony here today will demonstrate that there is no further need for him to be under formal supervision to ensure his sobriety. The conduct which led to his placement on probation, aside from the failures to disclose, which of course will be addressed during his testimony, but the convictions occurred well over a decade ago, and there has been no subsequent alcohol-related misconduct or conviction. Sobriety, much like rehabilitation, is a state of mind. And after hearing Dr. Francis's expected testimony this afternoon, or still this morning, the evidence will demonstrate that he has achieved both sobriety and rehabilitation. Dr. Francis knows that alcohol is a poison to his career, his goals, and the best version of who he is. He is now a dedicated husband, father, psychologist, member of his community, all of which he recognizes is only possible because of his sobriety. His incentives to maintain sobriety are far bigger than to simply be in compliance with the board's probation at this point. In submitting his petition for early termination, an often mentioned reason, not only by Dr. Francis, but those who wrote on his behalf, was to open up Drew's Place, a trauma treatment center in honor of his late best friend and combat veteran. You will hear from Dr. Francis today that he has followed through on that intention by opening up Drew's Place with his former boss, Stacy Bertagna, who also wrote on his behalf when submitting his petition, and a declaration from whom is among the exhibits we will introduce as evidence today. At this point, probation is preventing Dr. Francis from progressing in his career and serving those most in need of his services in Shasta County, as he is rejected from insurance panels from those most in need, including but not limited to veterans and first responders. The costs of probation are also preventing Dr. Francis from providing meaningful opportunities and experiences for his 2 young boys. And of course, it also makes traveling within and especially outside of the state extremely difficult. Included among the petition materials, which I believe are Exhibit 8 that the Deputy AG went over, are numerous letters of support from fellow members of this profession, his family, members of law enforcement, all of whom are aware of the convictions which prompted Dr. Francis's placement on probation. Those letters provide assurances that he takes responsibility for the conduct which led to his probation and opine that such conduct is unlikely to recur, with or without the board's continued supervision. Also included among the petition materials is a recent evaluation of Dr. Francis's psychological fitness undertaken by clinical psychologist Dr. Eugene Roeder. The results of that evaluation confirm that Dr. Francis has developed meaningful insight into the conduct which occurred in his early 20s, has a strong support network and incentives to prevent recurrence of that conduct, and that his sobriety since March of 2017 confirms that a substance use disorder is in sustained remission. In short, the petition materials and anticipated testimony today will support a determination that Dr. Francis can safely practice as a member of this profession without the board's formal supervision. And with that, Your Honor, I would like to briefly go over our 3 exhibits before questioning Dr. Francis.
All right.
As Exhibit A, we have a declaration from Kelsey Francis, Dr. Francis's wife, who's here in the audience today. As Exhibit B, we have a declaration from Stacy Bertagna, who's a licensed clinical social worker and the co-owner of Drew's Place. And then we have a declaration, or Exhibit C, we have a declaration of Officer Gabriel Smith. And I did provide a notice of intent to introduce these declarations to Deputy A.G. Yates. I did not receive an objection, and I understand there will be no objection to them coming in as direct evidence.
All right. Is that accurate, Counsel?
No, that's accurate. No objection, Your Honor.
All right. And are you requesting that each of these exhibits be admitted to evidence as direct evidence?
I do, Your Honor.
All right. Hearing no objections, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C are all admitted into evidence as direct evidence pursuant to Government Code Section 11514.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will now begin my questioning of Dr. Francis.
Okay, let's call him as a witness. Dr. Francis, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you provide today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please show your hand. You may want to move your microphone a little closer.
Excuse me.
Dr. Francis, what brings you before the board today?
I am petitioning the board for early termination of my probation.
And when did you start that probation?
June 1st of 2019.
And when is it set to end if it is not terminated early?
May 31st of 2026.
And what's the date of your sobriety?
March 26th, 2017.
And prior to that, did you have any sustained period of sobriety?
Yes. March 25th is my wedding day, and I had enjoyed a glass of champagne with my wife. And prior to that, I had a year to a year and a half of sobriety. And the only reason why I don't know the date is because it wasn't intentional. I had stopped drinking without purpose and realized that I wasn't drinking and I didn't need to be drinking. And that's when I chose to make it a permanent thing in my life to remove alcohol completely.
What's the actual date that you recognize as your date of sobriety?
March 26th, 2017.
Dr. Francis, have you ever been diagnosed as having an alcohol use disorder?
Yes, twice in full remission.
I'm sorry, what's the status of that disorder as of today?
In full remission.
Yeah.
How did you overcome your alcohol use disorder?
A number of ways. First off, it was with my own therapeutic process. I engaged in therapy for over a year and learned an incredible amount of insight into my life, into my past, into my family dynamic. And I learned that I was kind of the stereotypical abuser of trying to fill up or try to avoid all of my emotional emptiness via alcohol. Alcohol helped me become a version of myself that I thought I wanted to be. It made me the funny guy, the life of the party, and all those things that I thought I wanted because I couldn't be those things without it. I had never realized that because alcohol was always a part of my life since I can remember. My dad is what they call a functioning alcoholic. My mother is a recovering methamphetamine addict. My brother is a recovering methamphetamine addict. It's what I saw every day. I have vivid memories of my dad driving me to my baseball games with a Budweiser between his legs, driving my dad home from the lake because he was too drunk at 14 years old. It was just it was just my life. I didn't think it was abnormal until I dove into my own healing process and realized how dysfunctional that was. As I was in my own healing journey, I was dating my now wife, who was an incredible support. I've learned to develop deep, meaningful relationships with my friends and even with my family. I've even reconnected with my mom, who I hadn't spoken to for 10 years because I had to cut her off. My brother and my dad were all incredibly close. My friend group I surround myself with people who want the same things I want, to achieve goals, to help our community. I come from Shasta County, which is a very blue-collar county, and I'm very proud of that, but what comes with that also is a lot of substance use and self-destruction. And so a lot of the friend group that I surround myself with now is all about trying to rebuild the community, trying to help lift it back up to a kind of what we remember it as children. I exercise probably too much. I go on hikes. I fish. I have deep, meaningful conversations with my wife if I'm ever feeling emotionally vulnerable or struggling with anything. I also do that with my business partner, who is an incredible support for me. She was even when she was my boss. I could always rely on her for comfort, emotional comfort when I needed it at the workplace. And reflecting every day. I've just made it a purpose to reflect every day and appreciate what I have because of my sobriety. What I've been able to achieve so far in my life in the past 5.5 years or so is because of my sobriety, and I'm grateful for that.
Now, you began your response by mentioning therapy. When was that therapy participation?
I believe that was in September of 2016 is when it started, and ended around January of 2018. If I can recall correctly, before I moved back to Redding, because it was when I was in the Bay Area, when I was living in the Bay Area.
Do you no longer participate in therapy?
I do not participate in ongoing therapy, but I am still connected with a therapist whom I reach out to whenever there are things I'm going through that I can't seem to work through with my wife or my support group. And so I would say things come up probably once or twice every quarter or so where I meet and we meet for a few weeks in a row or as much as needed until the issue is resolved or I'm able to work through it.
In what period of your life were you actively abusing alcohol?
I would say it started around the age of 17. I mean, I was experimenting before that, but abusing alcohol started around the age of 17 and lasted until I was 26 or 27 years old.
And how old are you now?
I'm 38.
Dr. Francis, do you still feel the urge to drink?
I would say I have the urge to drink at times. It's hard for me to accept that's an urge. It's a fleeting thought that pops up occasionally. But yes, there are times throughout the year where having a beer or having a cocktail will sound nice.
And what do you do when you feel that urge or that fleeting thought?
First, I'm surprised because usually it's 6 months like in between them, and so I'm like, wow. And after that I talk to my wife. I go in, usually it's because I'm outside working, doing something outside. I'll go in the house and tell her, I just thought that a beer would sound really nice. And she usually looks surprised at me and is like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And we talk through and just see if there might be anything that could be creating that thought, if it's coming from a place of escape or avoidance of something that might be bothering me. And if it is, we talk about that. And if it isn't, then we set it aside and continue about our day.
Dr. Francis, in what period of your life did the arrests and convictions that Deputy A.G. Yates described occur?
I was 20 years old when I received my first DUI, and I was 26 years old when I received my last conviction, which was a driving on suspended license.
What insight have you gained about that period of your life?
A ton. When I was even up to 26 or 27, I could tell you that I was 100% sure. I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted, and I could tell you, as my father would say, I knew everything. But I couldn't have been more incorrect. I had learned that I had convinced myself that I knew what I wanted, and that in reality it was shame and anger and resentment towards myself, my family, anyone else possible, that was creating the destruction in my life, that was leading to the need to abuse alcohol, the need to escape. It was mind-blowing learning that I had been wrong all along, because I was sure that I had it figured out. And it was very quickly realized that I was wrong and I needed help and I needed to heal.
Let's address the failures to disclose in your application to the board. I believe it was referenced that you failed to disclose a fighting conviction in your initial application to the board. Can you please address that for us?
Yes. I think I touched on where I was at emotionally in my late adolescence and early 20s to mid-20s. I was driven by shame and anger and resentment to the point where I couldn't even accept that I had done these things. It would have shattered my ego. It would have shattered who I had thought I was. And so when being asked to disclose these offenses, I couldn't admit that one. I couldn't admit it to myself, and obviously, as a byproduct of that, I couldn't admit it to the board. And I was deceiving everyone involved there, including myself, which is foolish because I also know up here that I have to go through a full life scan that's going to reveal everything I've ever done in my entire life. And I think that speaks to the level of shame that I was experiencing, as I thought that I could still somehow navigate around that.
What about in a subsequent application? I believe it was referenced that you failed to disclose a conviction for driving without a valid license. Can you address that for us, please?
Yes. I wish I had a much more detailed excuse, but the reality of it is that I completely forgot to include that. My whole life I have been plagued with rushing through things, minimizing the importance of things. And unfortunately, I treated this very important application as the same, and I rushed through it. And even to the point where I checked, as Mr. Yates pointed out, I checked no, that I had never been convicted of a crime, which was obviously not true. And then even when given the opportunity to provide all the information that was needed, I didn't. And that was a complete lapse in judgment. There was no intent to deceive the board at that point. That was just complete, just rushing through it and not accepting how important this was for me.
Dr. Francis, why are you seeking termination of the remaining period of your probation?
I have finally reached the pinnacle of my career in terms of what I've wanted, my goals. Maybe not every licensed psychologist, but mine. I opened my own practice with my business partner, Stacy. I named it after my best friend who I lost 2.5 years ago. And the whole premise around Drew's Place, you can go on the website, you can look at our mission statement, is to help the kids in Shasta County. We have our ACEs score, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences score. The average score in Shasta County is 4. That is twice the average of California's. 4 or higher, not to get too much into it, leads to a number of horrible things for kids. Suicide, 15 times more likely. Diabetes, kidney disease, all those things that come with trauma. And I am one of those kids. I am a 4. I'm a 7, actually, out of 10. And all I want to do is help them. And my dad's a former Marine, my best friend, Army Ranger who passed away. All I want to do is help our veterans. Those are the 2 patient populations that I am most passionate about helping heal, who need it, in my opinion, the most, who have been, who fall through the cracks, because there's a lot of them. And I can't contract with one insurance agency that will allow me to see them. I am contracted with Medicare, which, if anyone, I'm sure you're all familiar with, is either older adults or adults with some form of disability. That is not children, and those are not veterans. I've been denied by TriWest TRICARE, which is the VA's insurance company they use. I've been denied by Blue Cross, Blue Shield, every single one, other than Medicare. I am currently hoping, with fingers crossed, to get approved with MHN as an EAP provider for our first responders, because that is another area of my career that I'm passionate about helping. I think it's coupled in with the veterans. Fingers crossed, as I submitted that application just a few days ago, and I'm not expecting to be approved, but I'm hoping. But the probation status, the restriction on my license, showing that my license is restricted, is the number one cited reason that I am not able to contract with any of these insurance providers. And because I can't help our blue collar kids, our parents, the parents are blue collar, the kids, I can't help them, and I can't help our veterans. And so therefore I can't build my caseload, and I can't earn a substantial wage to help provide for my family. I can't give my family the things I feel they deserve. My wife, my children. It's hard. Paycheck to paycheck is really hard when you have this degree that looks like you should be able to earn a decent living when you've worked so hard previously. It's really hard to kind of accept that's where I'm at. I've reached the pinnacle, I've reached my goal, and I'm not making enough money to be able to provide for my family. We have to rely on my wife's income much more. It makes traveling hard, which I know is a privilege. So that's why it's further down on the level of importance. But I have to get 2 weeks. I have to give 2 weeks notice in order to get approved to travel. If I get approved, I have to find a testing site that's within. It doesn't matter actually how far away it is. There has to be one nearby. Even going to my in-laws who live in the town of Copperopolis, which is near Sonora, the nearest testing site is an hour and a half away, and I'm required to test if I get selected to. And it's just incredibly stressful. And I know that I put myself here. Like, I know I'm on probation because of the things I did, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. But it doesn't remove the stress that I experience on a daily basis. The panic I experience when I think I forgot to check in at 11 o'clock at night. The panic I experience in the middle of a session when all of a sudden it just clicks that, you didn't check in, even if I already did. It doesn't make that go away knowing that I am responsible for it. And so those are the reasons why I'm asking for my probation to end early, to be terminated early.
You addressed why you're seeking a termination of the remaining balance of your probation. But have there been any positives or beneficial aspects of probation for you?
Absolutely. As I've spoken about earlier, is like I've spent a ton of time reflecting on my past prior to probation, looking and being able to accept and be accountable for a lot of the poor decisions I made as a result of my alcohol abuse. I've been able to recognize the damage and the destruction and the carnage that I've created, the people I put at risk, putting myself at risk physically and emotionally. I felt really good about that in the sense that I've come to some acceptance. But I hadn't thought about my future. And so the board placing me on probation, and I will admit it was frustrating. after that frustration settled, I was really able to appreciate how being forced to look at it again allowed me to understand how important it is that abusing alcohol, if I was still abusing substances or alcohol, how I could be putting my clients at risk. Not only myself and my family and the community, but my clients, and how it's the board's responsibility to protect those clients. And so I was able to reflect on a much deeper level. I thought I had kind of figured it out and got to a really good place, which I had, but the probation that was placed on me allowed me to get to a much better place and appreciate the significance of being a part of a cohort of licensed psychologists is an incredibly big deal. It's a privilege. And the board has an obligation to protect the people that we are going to be working with. And so I was able to just reflect on how important it is to think about the future and how, if I were to continue using substances, how much damage could come of it.
Now, 3.5 years in, at this point, is being on probation helping you maintain your sobriety?
Yeah. Yes.
In what ways?
It's a daily reminder that I have a history of abusing alcohol, and that when alcohol enters my system, I create wreckage. It's a reminder that to appreciate what I have. Although probation has limited me in so many ways financially and being able to reach out to the population that I care so much about, I'm still practicing. I'm still seeing people and I'm still helping people. So I'm grateful for that. I am eternally grateful for that. I think additional ways to maintain sobriety and appreciate what you have is an incredible source to have, a resource, should I say, to have.
Do you feel that you need those daily reminders in order to maintain your sobriety?
I feel like I have put in place enough daily reminders that the board's daily reminder of having to check in is not necessary anymore. I reflect every day. I appreciate what I have every day. I have my wife and my 2 boys every day. I have my business that I've created every day. I have all these amazing things that have come from being sober. And so being able to be in a place of gratitude and appreciation for those is enough for me to maintain my sobriety.
I'm not going to hold you to an exact number, but how many times approximately do you believe you've tested since you started probation?
I would say between 100 and 110 times. I know it's in the information, all the evidence that was submitted, the exact number, but between 100 and 110 times I believe I've tested.
Have you ever tested positive?
No, I have not.
Have you received any other probation violation aside from testing positive?
Yes.
So let's discuss those.
Okay.
What prompted your first probation violation?
My first violation, as Mr. Yates pointed out, was in September 2019. I was selected to test. I had gotten off work around 5 o'clock and went to go provide a specimen in which there was not a male observer there. And so they would not be able to complete the obligation I needed to complete. And by the time all that transpired, there was no other place to test. That's in an email that was sent to my probation monitor, Curtis Gardner, at that time. And because he said he could not corroborate that there wasn't a male there, that led to a violation. That violation also includes the failure to submit my quarterly report on time in July of that same year of 2019. The citation included the failure to provide a specimen and the failure to submit my quarterly report on time.
What about your second probation violation? What happened there?
That was the following year. In March, I was selected to test, and I have no excuse. I did not. I check in every morning, went to work, and by the time the day ended and I got home, I thought it was just a normal day, and I failed to fulfill my obligation to go test, and there's no excuse for that.
What prompted the third violation?
That was in April of the same year of 2020. I was selected to test, and I chose not to. That was during the pandemic, when the pandemic first broke out. I believe it broke out in March of 2020. And I will only speak for myself, but I feel comfortable sharing this feeling, is that I was terrified. There was a shelter-in-place order put in place by the governor. I was working from home 100% telehealth. And we had an 18-month-old son, and my wife and I were trying to get pregnant at that time. And so my wife and I made the conscious decision to not take any chance of going out into the public, especially a medical facility, to provide a specimen. And we were willing to accept the consequences for that.
What about the fourth violation?
That was in May, and the circumstances were the same. Shelter-in-place order was still going on. People were panicking, including my family and myself. We had no idea how this was killing people, but we knew it was killing people. We didn't know if it was, I just remember the airborne and lasting 6 hours, and nobody knew anything except for that people were dying from it. And so again, after just discussing it with my wife, we made a relatively easy decision to accept the consequences of not going out and providing a specimen.
And the fifth violation?
That was a failure to check in, I believe, which was also in May. There's no excuse for that. I forgot to check in. I wish I had something better to say about that, but unfortunately I do not. I lapsed in judgment that day.
And then what about the sixth and final violation?
The sixth violation was in September, a little bit later in that year. I had gone on a hunting trip with permission from my probation monitor, with the agreement that I would return on a set day and check in. On that day, which was the day we were set to return, we got a flat tire on the side of the mountain, and I had no service. So during the hunting trip, I was not required to check in because there was no service where I was. And so I failed to check in on the day that my probation monitor and I agreed upon due to a flat tire. But again, there's no excuse for that. I believe there's one more violation when my attorney and I were reviewing the documentation that was uploaded. A violation occurred earlier this year in April of 2022. Yes, sorry, April of 2022. There was an additional violation where I failed to check in.
Do you believe these violations are something the board should consider, deciding whether your petition should be granted or not?
Absolutely, yes.
And is there anything you would specifically like to share with the board regarding these violations?
Yes. I understand that when my attorney and I signed the stipulated settlement agreement, that I was agreeing to do everything that was on that list. Whether I wanted to or not, or whether I felt it was right, it was irrelevant. I agreed to do that. And I can say that other than the 2 times where I chose to not provide a specimen during the pandemic, those other decisions were just complete mistakes on my part. Complete lapses in judgment, and I can't provide any legitimate excuse for that. But I do not regret the 2 times I did not provide a specimen. because there's no way that I would do anything to risk my family's life. I don't care if it meant I had to stay on probation longer or get violated and pay a fine, whatever came of it. I was okay with accepting whatever consequence came my way. But ultimately, I signed the agreement to test no matter what. So all of them are on me, and I accept full responsibility for those.
Now, you mentioned your actual probation agreement. And did part of that agreement include a requirement that you undergo a psychological evaluation?
Yes, it did.
Did you comply with that condition?
Yes, I did.
When did you undergo that evaluation?
I was placed on probation June 1st of 2019. I completed the evaluation in July of 2019.
Did you have any prior relationship with the evaluator?
No. In fact, when I met with Curtis Gardner, who was my probation monitor originally, he provided me an evaluator to seek out to complete the evaluation. But I have had a professional relationship with her prior when I lived in the Bay Area, so I had let him know that, and he then provided me with a different evaluator to go see.
Were any further conditions added to your probation agreement after that psychological evaluation?
No, there were no further conditions added.
When was the first time you saw the results of that evaluation?
When you and I were reviewing them after they were submitted for evidence.
So recently?
Yes, within the last 20 days.
Did the evaluator find that you had an alcohol use disorder in remission?
Yes, he did.
Did you see that the evaluator concluded you were able to practice psychology and function in a professional capacity without any limitation?
Yes, I did.
See that among the materials that Deputy AG Yates submitted as evidence today?
Did I see that?
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes.
Dr. Francis, did you also voluntarily undergo a more recent psychological evaluation?
Yes, I completed an additional psychological evaluation in April of 2021, about 3 months before we submitted our petition for early termination.
And did that April 2021 evaluation also find that you had an alcohol use disorder in remission?
Yes, Dr. Roeder cited that I had alcohol use disorder in full remission, and he even further explained that it's beyond the requirement for full remission.
And did that evaluation, or the results of that evaluation, reach any opinion as to whether your remaining on probation was necessary for the protection of the public?
Yes, he spoke specifically that his opinion was that probation was no longer warranted in order for me to practice safely.
And did you submit the results of that evaluation with the rest of your petition materials?
Yes, I did.
Did you see it among the Deputy AG's exhibits?
Yes, I did. I believe that's in Exhibit 8.
Dr. Francis, where was the first place of employment where you utilized your license after you were placed on probation?
That was at the Psychiatric Care Center in Redding, California, intensive outpatient mental health facility.
And were they made aware that you were on probation?
Yes, it's part of my my probation terms was to notify any potential employer of my probation status, and if offered employment, to provide them with the stipulated settlement agreement, or I'm sorry, the statement of issues.
And did you provide them with a statement of issues?
Yes, I did.
And are you still employed at the Psychiatric Care Center?
No, I left there in October of 2021.
And where are you now employed?
I work for and am co-owner of Drew's Place Psychotherapy Services.
Anywhere else?
Yes, I work very part-time for a 100% telehealth company named Silver Lake Psychology.
And is Silver Lake Psychology aware that you're on probation?
Yes, I believe there's an email exchange in the evidence that was submitted between their director and Mr. Gardner, who was my monitor at the time, confirming that she was aware of my probation status and received the statement of issues.
Now, you mentioned that you're a co-owner of Drew's Place. Who's the other co-owner or co-owners?
The other co-owner, there's one other, is Stacy Bertagna, who is my former boss at the Psychiatric Care Center. She was the clinical director there.
And I imagine she's still aware that you're on probation?
Yes, she is very aware that I am here right now. She sent me a very supportive text this morning.
Is that the same Ms. Bertagna who wrote a declaration that we introduced into evidence?
Yes, that is.
Dr. Francis, why should the board feel assured that the conduct which led to your placement on probation will not recur if the remaining period of probation is terminated?
I feel the board can feel assured that that conduct will not happen again because of, one, the incredible healing journey that I've been on and that I started in therapy. The daily reminders and the daily activities that I engage in that support my wellness, my mental health, that continue to nurture my spirit and the love I have for our community. The healthy coping skills that I am able to engage in on a daily and weekly basis, like exercising and going out in nature and engaging in deep, meaningful conversations. And I feel like when it really boils down to it is, I have so much to lose now. I honestly feel like I have something to lose. Whereas when I was abusing substances, I didn't have anything to lose, or at least I felt like I didn't. And I've in those 5.5 years of sobriety, I have built so many important connections. I have learned so much about myself. I have opened a business, and I cannot fathom doing anything to put that, my family, my friends, at risk ever again. And I will do everything I can on a daily basis to maintain my sobriety and maintain my conduct.
Before I turn it over to Deputy AG Yates, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the board or with our administrative law judge?
Yes. It's going to be hard for me to say this without getting a little emotional, but I come from nothing. And I was given zero chance to do anything with that nothing. And all I want to do for the rest of my life is help people like me, people who didn't have a chance, people who didn't have the resources that they needed. And what I'm talking about is our kids in Shasta County. I want to be able to get them in the door so that I can help them heal. And I want to be able to help our veterans who, as everybody knows, are taking their lives way too often. And it's not because the VA is doing anything wrong, it's just because we have too many veterans who are struggling and we can't get them in, they can't get them in. And so I want to be an additional resource for them to help them heal. I am a trauma specialist. It's all I ever work on is trauma, learning, getting better at learning how to help people heal. And they need the help. And so all I do is ask you to please consider who I am today. I know I've done a lot of bad. I know that, and I own that, and I wish I hadn't. And I know that I violated my probation. But that's not who I am. I love deeply. I care deeply. I work on my mental health. I work on myself. I'm a firm believer that I have to be the best version of myself in order for me to be able to help anybody. I truly believe that now. So I just ask you to look at who I am today and what I've done in the past 5.5 years of my sobriety when considering allowing me to reach the people who I believe in my county need it the most. And I thank you all for allowing me to practice in the first place, even on probation. I appreciate that. But I feel like the people I want to help are just like right there, and I can't. So thank you for hearing my case today.
I don't have any further questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Yates?
Thank you, Your Honor. Before I start, how are we on time?
Well, it's 11:38. Are we good on time?
Yeah.
We're fine.
Would it be wiser to maybe step back and allow the board, if they have any questions, and then resume, or should I just move along?
Let's just move along. If we're
Okay.
fine on time, you can proceed.
Excellent, thank you. So I'd like to just start out with asking a few questions about the petition for termination, or the termination of probation that you submitted. Is this your first attempt?
Yes.
Okay. And as we sit here today, are you disputing any charges that were originally filed against you?
No.
And would you agree that the charges in the previous documents mentioned, are those accurate?
Yes.
Do you accept responsibility for your actions that led to the limitations that were placed on your license?
Absolutely.
Now, I read a summary previously, just kind of going over the history of your license with the board. Is there anything in that summary that I might have gotten incorrectly that you'd like to correct me on right now?
It's hard to remember everything you said, but nothing stood out as you were going over everything that I thought was incorrect.
Okay, thank you. Now, based on the facts of this matter, would you agree that alcohol monitoring was at least a reasonable probation term to your agreement?
Absolutely, yes.
Are you currently enrolled in AA meetings, also known as Alcoholics Anonymous?
No, I am not.
Okay. Have you been?
I have in the past, yes.
Okay. Is there any reason why you're not currently availing yourself to AA?
I believe I've created a strong enough support network for myself. My ability to reach out for help when I'm feeling like I am encountering something I cannot manage on myself in terms of stress or anything that comes up. I reach out to my therapist. I reach out to my business partner. I reach out to my friends. I reach out to my wife. And I continue working on myself and being more mindful of my issues that I'm experiencing. And so I do not feel AA is a necessary resource for me to take advantage of.
Okay, and I know you said that you were in therapy and now you don't engage in therapy regularly. Is that accurate?
Yes.
When did you stop engaging in therapy regularly?
I think I said that a little earlier, which was, I want to say January of 2018.
Okay. When you say you occasionally reach out to your therapist, is that like a phone call or is that an actual session or how does that work?
It's usually an actual session unless they're not available for that. And then we do a telehealth. It's never via phone unless it's scheduling the appointment. And then it's either face-to-face or via telehealth.
And approximately how often does that occur?
I would say once or twice a quarter, things come up for me that I need additional help processing through, whether it's client-related. Sometimes clients trigger me or trigger us as therapists, our own stuff that's unprocessed, and seeking consultation or therapy helps resolve that.
Okay. Now, I can't speak for the board, but based on my review of this case, my bigger issue, not so much the convictions, which I think you adequately explained, but it's really the misstatements and the inaccuracies in the two applications for a psych assistant license. You recall what I'm referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So the first application, there's an omission. That's February 2014, and you failed to disclose an arrest and conviction, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So you previously mentioned that was, I guess the word you said was deceitful. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Deceiving myself and therefore deceiving the board.
I mean, were you intentionally trying to omit that, or was it more just, when you say deceiving yourself, can you explain that a little bit more? Explain a little bit more, please?
Yeah. I was deceiving everybody. I was somehow magical. It's called magical thinking. I somehow thought that if I didn't include it, they wouldn't find it.
All right, so your thought process was, this happened, but I'm just not going to mention it, and hopefully, okay.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. And then the second one, it sounds like the way you described it was, and by second one, I'm referring to the 2016 application. It sounds like your description of that was, it was just, I guess, sloppy paperwork.
Absolutely, yes. I historically, prior to my own healing, I rushed through pretty much everything I did and minimized the importance of pretty much everything I did. And so this was unfortunately another example of how I did that.
Okay. Despite the fact that you had already received an application back for, I guess, failing to mark those arrests and convictions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was there any intent to deceive based on that 2016 application?
I don't believe so. I'll be honest, I can't recall exactly what my motive was there, but I don't, because I had already admitted to them in the previous application, I don't believe there was any intent to deceive there. I believe it was it was a pure mistake.
All right, and so you mentioned some of those citations that occurred during your probation reports. I think most of them had some sort of, I guess, a reasonable explanation for missing. Does that sound accurate?
I can say that 2 have at least a reasonable explanation, was that I was unwilling to put any of my family at risk of harm by going out into the public during the pandemic.
Right. I would say a car, a tire blowing, and being unable to do that sounds reasonable to me. Would you agree?
Yes.
So it looks like 2 of them out of I think the 7 that I mentioned, 2 of those were just forgot to check in. Is that fair?
Complete lapse in judgment, yes.
Okay. And out of all these, I reviewed the probation reports, but out of all these, were there any positive tests for anything or inconclusive tests?
No. I don't believe so.
Now,
no positives, I know that. I know there were no positives. If there was something inconclusive, I'm unaware of that.
Okay, thank you. Now, you're during this term, which I think is term 2 in your probation, there are 2 levels, a level 1 and a level 2. Do you recall that?
Yeah, level 1 is when I'm required to test. I can't remember, you mentioned it earlier, like 48 to 100 and something times, right? And then level 2 is when it reduces down. Is that what you're speaking of?
Correct, yeah. For my understanding is that year 1, it's 36 times to 104 times, and then that reduces to 24 tests per year in year 2 and after that. Does that sound right?
That does.
Okay, and so are you currently in level 2?
I am.
All right, and how many of those citations occurred during level 2?
Let's see, March of 2020. Can I have a second to do some math?
Feel free.
Okay.
I'm not the best counter myself.
So June of 2020 was when I would have started the tier 2. So June of 2020, moving forward, my first violation was in March, March, April, May, September. I'd say 6 of them.
Okay.
I think.
During the second tier?
Yes.
And now, based on my notes, this might be incorrect, but it appeared to me that prior to starting probation, your probation told, meaning it started later than what the date should have been. Is that accurate?
Can you clarify? I'm not exactly sure what you're...
Usually when a probation has an effective date, that's the start of probation. It appeared it told by a period of time based on my review of this. I could be incorrect. I just want to see if that's accurate.
Just so I clarify, are you saying that in June, when probation started, I I didn't have my license, or I still had my license and I was on probation. I just wasn't practicing.
Yeah, you had your license, maybe it was a period of non-practice or something like that?
I don't believe so. I think as soon as I got my license, I thought I started practicing.
Okay, so as soon as the effective date occurred, you were practicing and checking in with your monitor and all of that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So other than the citations that I mentioned, as well as those non-compliance instances that I mentioned earlier, have you had any disciplinary or non-compliance issues with the board during probation?
Other than the ones that you mentioned?
Correct.
No.
Okay. Have you had any civil issues or complaints regarding patients that the board might not know about?
No, not at all. Not that I'm aware of anyways. Nothing's been brought to my attention.
Okay. So moving on to Exhibit 9, you received several letters of recommendation. I guess briefly, can you describe who the authors are, their relationship to you, why you chose them to write letters of recommendation for you?
Yeah. It's going to be hard to remember everybody. This was over a year ago that we submitted them and I reviewed them. But a number of friends of mine who are California Highway Patrol officers submitted, I believe, 3, Clint Tetons, Richard Bennett, Gabe Smith. They submitted them. They are dear friends of mine who I've known for anywhere from 6 to 12 years. My wife, of course, my father, my brother, not my brother, my father, my current business partner, my previous employer, who the director of operations at Psychiatric Care Center, Paula Hinton. She was kind of the head boss other than the owner. Drawing a blank if there was more, I apologize. All of these people have been integral in either supporting me through this journey. Psychiatric Care Center was well aware of my situation before they accepted me as an employee, before I applied in anything, and they've supported me all the way through it. Stacy, my previous direct supervisor, the clinical director, who is now my business partner, is well aware and have supported me through everything, and has been very understanding and reminded me this morning that no matter what happens, you are not that person who made those mistakes, and we know that, being my support group. My wife, of course, knows me. Knows me very well and knows I'm not that man that made those mistakes. They're all people who either have known me while I was creating destruction, and have seen me heal, or have seen me while I've been healed. Some of those relationships are like with Stacy. She never knew me when I was abusing substances.
And I see that you included a letter from a licensed psychologist. I didn't write the name down.
Chet Sunday, yes.
All right.
He's a colleague of mine.
Can you explain who Chad Sunday is?
Yeah, he is a licensed psychologist in Redding, California. He works at the VA home. He's the chief psychologist on staff there. He also runs a philanthropic group that I am a part of, where we give back to the community. It's a men's group where we smoke cigars and talk about anything that's important for us in terms of what's going on in our lives. And so he is he's not, I wouldn't consider him my friend. He's a very good colleague of mine in terms of we are very close on a professional level.
Okay. And then I wanted to just go back. You're talking about your practice. So what is your current practice right now?
I work and co-owner of Drew's Place Psychotherapy Services with the small part-time work with Silver Lake Psychology Services.
Okay. So no longer with, I think it was Redding
Psychiatric Care Center?
Yeah.
No, I haven't been there since October of last year.
Okay. And what percentage of your time would you say go between the two jobs that you have?
Currently?
Yeah.
I would say 99% of my time is spent working for Drew's Place, either as the owner in those duties or as a therapist.
Okay.
And all I do is see, like, I think I have 2 clients remaining on the Silver Lake caseload, so 2 hours.
And it's you and a partner?
For Drew's Place?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what kind of credentials does your partner have?
She's a licensed clinical social worker.
Okay. Are you currently supervising any psych assistants or any other positions?
No, I'm not allowed to do that while on probation.
Okay. Did you while you were at your previous employment?
No, I've never supervised anybody.
Okay. Now, just to wrap this up, if you're unable to terminate probation while we're here, is there a modification that you would request in lieu of that?
We didn't consider that. I don't know what modification would help me achieve what I'm wanting to achieve, which is to be able to work with the clients that I want to work with. So being on probation, whether you removed my ability to supervise, or being on probation, whether you removed my need to test, would still stop me from being able to see the children and our veterans that I primarily want to work with. So financially, sure, I would love to not have to pay for it, because that hurts very much. But ultimately, what it comes down to is I'm asking to be off of probation so that I can help the people that need to be helped and that I care about.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further?
All right, thank you. Now's our opportunity to take questions from the board. Earlier, I suggested that we proceed from left to right, but considering that this matter is being electronically recorded, I think it may be better if I literally call out each member to ask questions if they have them, so the record is clear as to who's speaking. That way, you don't have to state your name every time you speak. So let's start with President Tate.
Thank you, Dr. Francis, for coming and speaking with us today. I have one question, and I think that Deputy Attorney General Yates was hovering around it, but I just want a little more detail. In one of your statements, when you were being questioned about the initial paperwork to the board that you did not answer honestly, the quote you said was, I did not intend to deceive the board at that point, and then you referenced a lapse in judgment at that time. At what other points were you intentionally trying to deceive the board?
I'm recalling all the things that I may have been doing or done during my application periods. I think other than leaving the fighting in public or fighting conviction off of my record, at least from what I'm recalling, I don't believe there was any other point when I was trying to deceive the board. I wasn't trying to trick them into believing something that wasn't true.
Be sure you keep your voice up as well.
Oh,
you're
sorry
fading
about
a little
that.
bit.
Yeah.
So the initial paperwork and then the fighting charge, is that correct?
Yeah, so the initial paperwork in 2014, when I submitted to be a registered psych assistant, I omitted the fighting in public conviction, should I say. That was intentional. That was deceit. I was hoping to get away with it. When I submitted the second time around and I left off the driving on suspended license convictions, that was a complete lapse in judgment. That was not, there was no intent there for me to, am I not answering it correctly?
The truth is the correct answer. I just want to clarify, did you disclose those driving without a valid license convictions the first time around?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I concluded everything except for the fighting conviction on the first time I applied.
Okay. And then the second time?
Those were left off unintentionally.
Got it.
As a result of
So you had disclosed them already?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the board was fully aware of them.
Got it.
That's
Okay.
my understanding, yes.
Okay.
My recollection.
Thank you for clarifying. That was my only question.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Vice President Fu.
Thank you for making time today and for coming in. So you mentioned an interest as a part of the reason for why you're seeking relief because of a desire to work with children and veterans. And I'm curious if you've pursued professional development opportunities with regard to treatment of these two communities, and if that's your current area of practice right now at Drew's Place.
So regarding working with children and veterans, my business partner, she supervises an intern who is specializes working with children. I specialize more working with veterans and first responders. So I want to help, and I am passionate about helping children, but I don't feel like it's my area of expertise, if that makes sense. So we hired a clinician whose area of expertise that is, and we want to continue to hire additional clinicians who have that area of expertise. Regarding the first responders and veterans, yes, I'm currently actually volunteering for the First Responder Support Network, which has retreats in Napa County that is paid for by, usually it's workman's comp, because our first responders are out on work comp. So it's, and it's 100% volunteer based. So I attend, I attend their retreats. Their retreats are every other week, and they are a week long. Currently, my role is to be there on the first day and the last day to help process their traumatic events therapeutically, and then in between that, they go through a significant level of education and therapeutic work. So I'm doing that to further my competence in working with our first responders, and I've done trainings with working with trauma and veterans as well.
And in that volunteer service, that organization is aware that you're currently on probation?
Yes.
And one last question, famously said, that's usually not the case. You talked about how when it came to filing the application, the second time around, with the exclusion of the driving convictions, that it was, I think you said, you've rushed through things, and it's been something that you're working with. Do you see the connection with this idea of rushing through things with the practice of psychology, and what are some of the management practices or management tools you've been using to manage the desire to rush through things? And let me give you an example, which is, one could say that when you're rushing through things, you might forget to get informed consent from a client, for example, or taking detailed notes as required. So I'm curious what the management tools are with regard to that, and its connection to this practice.
Of course. Well, at the practice currently, we have all of our consent forms and everything reviewed with our executive assistant. Once she has completed that, then if it's my client that I'm going to be seeing, then I review all of those forms with the client during the very beginning of the first session to make sure that if any I's were not dotted or T's were not crossed, we are making sure to get those things completed. Regarding notes, I think I would like to say one of my strong suits has always been being a good note writer and being a timely note writer. Is my training in school, for whatever reason, while I was getting my doctorate degree, it's something that I was very partial to, and being very thorough without being too thorough, learning the dynamic of writing a note and detailing the information that's required. So for me, the rushing was much more an anxiety response for me. And because of my trauma and my history, it makes everything an emergency. But because I've healed significantly and worked so much, I'm not going to say it's gone, but it's such at a reduced level than what it ever was, that I'm able to catch the things that you might be concerned, what you're asking about, which could be concerning if I overlook. I'm not in a rush to do hardly anything anymore. I'm much more able to be present and mindful and emotional in my process, and so that's what allows me to be thorough and making sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Thank you. Dr. Kasuga?
Hi, Dr. Francis. Just want to commend you on your sobriety thus far, and just want to ask a few questions to explore the durability of that sobriety. So you talked a little bit about having a stint at AA. Can you talk a little bit how long were you in AA for, and did you have a sponsor when you were in AA?
Yeah, I'll speak to the obvious time I was in AA, which was during my DUI, my program that the second time around when it's required. So I did that and completed that 18-month of multiple offender program. So I had to attend AA meeting two meetings every week during that program. And then I moved away and I moved to the Bay Area, and I attempted to re-engage into AA while I was also in my therapeutic healing journey. And it felt like it didn't resonate with me. Excuse me. And so after attending probably 10 to 12 meetings at different locations, I found that my therapy process, which also focused on addiction in there, was more beneficial to my healing and my maintenance of sobriety. And so I was never attending long enough to establish with a sponsor.
Got it. So if you will be granted termination of probation, what guarantees can you provide the board that you're able to maintain your sobriety without the formal support and structure that the probation provides? Like, for instance, what if you have an urge and talking to your wife, who's a very good support person for you, is not enough to hold off on those urges? What guarantees can you provide the board as to a robust plan for the future for your sobriety?
Of course, that's a great question. I can't guarantee that I will never drink again. Not because I want to drink again, but because I can't guarantee anything about the future. I can guarantee that I'm going to work diligently on a daily basis to continue to nurture what has been created so far in my life, all the positivity, all the love, all the connection, which has allowed me to maintain my sobriety, coupled with the probation. So I can guarantee that part of sobriety is a maintenance. It is not a guarantee for anybody, whether they're not in AA or in AA. All we can guarantee, I feel, is that we do the work every day and that we appreciate what has come from sobriety and reflect on what has come from abuse. And those are things that I do on a daily basis. And so I will always, if an urge comes up or a thought comes up to want to have a drink, I will go through every resource possible that I have, which includes all of my friends, all of my family, my wife, my business partner. I'll reach out to therapy. I'll do everything in my power. I'll exercise. I will go out on hikes. I will do everything that so far has been able to help me sustain my sobriety. I can guarantee that I'll do that. But unfortunately, I wish I could guarantee that I'll never drink again, but I don't believe anybody can guarantee that. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so
Okay.
much. No further question, Your Honor.
All right, Dr. Cervantes.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have Dr. Sheets.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, being so open with us. Just kind of a follow-up on Dr. Kasuga's question. Since earlier you had said that you didn't see a 12-step program as relevant for you, how do you how would you see that as a psychologist potentially for other clients that you may see?
That's a great question. The first thought that comes to my mind is resistance, that they don't want to admit that their problem is as serious as it is. But at the same time, I also believe that not everything it's not a one size fits all. I know, when I was at Psychiatric Care Center I was the department head of our intensive outpatient program for the chemical dependency unit. So I worked with addicts every single day for 3 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. And so an AA was a requirement for them to attend, to be a part of our group. And I felt this way prior, but I also learned that during this time for 2.5 years working there and running this program, that AA is not for everybody. It is not a one-size-fits-all. It can be incredibly beneficial for a number of addicts. And when I say AA, I mean NA as well, all the 12-step programs. But it doesn't work for everybody. Because also included in these programs are people who are still significantly struggling and dysfunctional, and they are exposed to people showing up under the influence. And so it puts them at risk of relapse. And so to answer your question, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, I would see that as a resistance. I would explore it as resistance. I wouldn't assume, and I would not judge it as resistance because I wouldn't know. But it would pop into my head, of course, that this person is minimizing the seriousness of their substance use disorder and their addiction.
And so and maybe you answered this with Dr. Kasuga, so I apologize if I wasn't right here. For you, a 12-step program was not right. How come? I'm not sure.
I don't think I addressed that, and if I did, I don't remember, so I will address it now. For me, being surrounded by large groups of people who talk about the destruction that they caused while they were using is triggering for me. I did not, unfortunately, and I know this can be a big benefit of AA, is it can be a sense of not being alone. But I've never felt alone in my destruction because I come from that. Generations of my family have been destructive substance abusers. And so I didn't feel alone in that. And I felt I needed to be in a place where I can get direct therapeutic. I felt like, and I feel like my abuse came from an emotional disorder, not an addiction. Although addiction runs in my family, I felt like I needed to heal from the inside out versus the outside in. And that's where, when I was doing AA and doing engaging in weekly therapy, what I learned and what I was able to take from the therapy sessions were far more beneficial from what I was taking from the AA meetings. And I wasn't being triggered here, and I was being triggered at the meetings. And so that's how I came to the conclusion that I didn't feel AA was something for me. Okay. Maybe if I wasn't doing therapy, I probably would have stuck to AA. But because I had two things going at once, I was able to really appreciate the benefits of what I was experiencing in therapy, and also be aware of how dysregulating it was for me to be at the meetings where people were talking about all the things that they had done and all the destruction that they had caused.
Thank
I
you
hope that
for
answers your question.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then I guess just a little follow-up was, are there any other types of organized support programs that you might see as helpful, whether for yourself or you might recommend to clients?
Well, I think there's a number of organized networks.
Around chemical dependency.
Yeah. One of them is the program I used to run, which obviously it's an intensive outpatient program. So that's people who are most usually getting out of rehab or trying to do the last effort to not have to go to rehab. But I know there's a resource there. But other than that, other than the 12 steps and this intensive outpatient chemical dependency program, I can't acknowledge there being anything, at least around my area, that could benefit other. I'm just a firm believer. With that said, I'm just a firm believer that, for me, I can only speak for myself, that my abuse came from denial and avoidance of my emotions, of the anger, of the resentment, of the shame, of the guilt, of the list goes on and on and on. That's where my need to avoid stemmed from. And because I am engaging in all that awareness, as much awareness as I can, and hopefully more and more every day, my desire to use is minimal. And I'm not saying it won't ramp up if something obviously emotional takes place, and that I believe in my heart that I have a support network and I have enough safeguards in place to help me help reduce any chance of me relapsing or using alcohol again.
Thank you, Dr. Francis.
All right, Member Nistor.
Hi, Dr. Francis. Thank you for your time and going through this process with the board today. One question that I just had is, wanted to go back to the probation violations, and a number of them were, explained away, and I think we all have understanding there. There were a couple less that where you didn't comply, and I'm curious if at any time you thought, I wonder how this will reflect on me by not testing today.
Are you speaking to the ones where I didn't make a conscious decision?
Correct.
Like the accidental ones? And if that would affect me on a day like today?
Yeah, I'm in the moment, like I'm going against my probation. How will that impact, how will that decision impact
My future?
my future?
Absolutely. Every time when I violated, even when I did it intentionally and chose not to provide a specimen due to the pandemic, it terrified me. I wanted to have a clean record as much as I could, so that if given the opportunity, if I could apply for early termination, I could do that. And so I think I spoke to it, excuse me, briefly when I would have it's not a panic attack, but just this quick jolt of anxiety that would fly through me whenever I thought I had forgotten to test, even if I had already forgot to check in. And so, yeah, every time I violated probation, I considered the consequence of what that could be when I'm able to apply for termination, or if they're going to revoke my license. I mean, that was the big one. Are they going to take it? Oh my God, so I would talk with my wife regularly. She knows how scared I was. And so, yeah, there was a lot of fear there of at any point getting a letter in the mail or via email saying that we are going to revoke your license due to the violations. Even when I consciously made the decision not to test, I knew that was going to happen, and it was scary.
Okay, thank you for your response. That's all I have.
I do also want to clarify, I believe the only 2 times he made a conscious decision were when the shelter-in-place orders initially came down. And aside from that, if he failed to check in or he failed to timely provide a specimen because there wasn't a male observer, whatever the case was, there are email chains between him and his probation monitor that are among the exhibits. And at least it's my recollection that every time he did sincerely and deeply apologize and address it with his probation monitor. So it wasn't something that he just ignored. It was addressed every time.
Okay,
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, it was. Oh my gosh, Curtis, I'm so sorry I forgot to check in today. I can't believe I did this. That's usually what it involved. I was very regretful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Phillips?
Yes. First thing I wanted to say is the board members have not seen Exhibit A, B, and C. We don't have copies of them. We should have copies of them if we're going to consider them. You have a notebook for all of us?
I have 3 extra notebooks.
Okay, well, we're going to need 9 copies?
I can have those sent to you today.
Yeah, well, we're going to be discussing the case over lunch, so you might want to make arrangements to get them to us before that.
Okay.
Okay? I just have a couple of questions for you, Dr. Francis.
Yes, sir.
Do you consider yourself an alcoholic?
I do not.
Do you consider yourself somebody that had an emotional problem that abused alcohol?
I believe myself to be someone who had a substance use disorder.
Based on emotions, not on an addiction?
Yes.
Okay. So now you've largely resolved a lot of those emotional problems, correct?
Yes, I believe I.
So why not start drinking again?
It's a great question. The main reason is that I've lost the desire to drink. I see that for nothing good comes from it. I don't see how any way it helps a situation. The reason why I drank was so that it helped me become who I thought I wanted to be, which was like the center of attention, the guy everybody liked, and I no longer need alcohol to be that person. I wrote it in my narrative statement that I can go to weddings and barbecues and dance and be silly, and I still get the love and nurturing that I thought I needed alcohol for. And so there's just no longer a need for it versus what I felt I needed it to be the person I wanted to be.
That sounds a little bit different than protecting your sobriety through an action plan. That's kind of like, I don't need it anymore. I guess I'm not going to do it anymore.
That's
the way it sounds to me.
That's how it started. I mean, when I stopped drinking, it was by accident. Like I wasn't drinking. I hadn't been going out and ordering beers with my friends or having drinks with my wife or anything. It was unconscious. Once I realized that I hadn't been drinking, that's when I made a choice to say, I don't want to drink anymore. Like I obviously don't want it anymore. I obviously don't need it. I have everything I've ever wanted without it. So there's no need for it. And there are, I believe, plenty of people who are not alcoholics who have made very poor decisions while under the influence of alcohol.
Sure.
And so that's where I feel I am, is that I don't need alcohol. I don't want alcohol. But is there a chance that I could do something really stupid if I started drinking again? Absolutely. And there's no reason to even find out. Whereas an alcoholic, they touch it, they're going to go full bore. They're going to go from 0 to 100.
Well, frankly, your criminal record sounds like when you touched it, you went full bore.
Sure.
I mean, you had two DUIs.
Yep.
And they weren't low blood counts.
No, absolutely correct. I mean.
And you had a public fighting.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then you continued to drive without a license.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which was
I
not
understand
alcohol
that was
related.
in a younger time in your life.
Yes. I was, I think, 26 when I got the last driving on suspended license. So that was 12 years ago. I've been on an incredible journey since then, sir. And
let me ask you, you said you've got this great support system, your wife, colleagues, friends.
Yes.
Are any of them sober alcoholics?
Not sober alcoholics, sober drug addicts, or recovering drug addicts.
Recovering drug addicts?
Yes.
How many of them are recovering drug addicts?
I'd say 3 of them are recovering addicts.
And they're actively in recovery?
Meaning that they're attending meetings, or meaning that they're still not using?
Well, they're abstinent?
Yes.
From both alcohol and drugs?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
There's one other thing that puzzles me, and that is psych assistant application number 1. You fail to disclose one conviction. Your application gets bounced. So you're going to go fill out psych assistant application number 2, and you're rushing through the application and you forget to talk about the criminal complaints?
Yeah.
Can you help me understand that?
Honestly, I wish I could. It comes down to the fact, I mean, even on the application, when it asked if I had been convicted of a criminal offense, misdemeanor, felony, blah, 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 I put no.
Even knowing that the first application was bounced because you hadn't fully disclosed?
Yes. Because it wasn't intentional. It wasn't with deceit. It was because I was rushing through. I kind of remember what that application looks like. And I remember it was like, yes, 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 and then a string of no's or something along those lines for me.
Was the first application getting rejected, was that mildly traumatic for you?
Yes.
But that didn't slow you down?
No, that was the level of denial and shame I was still living in.
Okay.
Obviously, the first DUI didn't slow me down. The first driving on suspended didn't slow me down, unfortunately. Like, I was in such a level of denial and shame that, like, I couldn't even feel the impact that those things were having on my life. I couldn't even experience it because my denial was like, just move forward, just rush through life.
Even after the first rejection?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
All right, Member Riscati?
Your Honor, before we get there, Deputy Yates and I were just discussing. So the declarations, they're actually covers to letters of support, and those letters of support are among the exhibits that were submitted. They are updated declarations that cover 3 of the letters of support. Absolutely.
And for the record, those are covered in Exhibit 9 for Bertanga at AGO 89, Kelsey Francis at AGO 90, and Mr. Smith at AGO 104.
There's been subsequent vision of those documents.
Yes.
And do you anticipate we'll be able to have those in short order? I know you're sitting here right now. You haven't been able to make any calls.
As soon as we conclude the questioning, I'll make a call to the office.
All right, thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Francis. So I just had a quick question going back to the violations. For the one, I guess I just want to know what efforts were made. I know that it was mentioned that there were emails sent and you were apologetic. But for the one with the flat tire, understand you didn't have cell service, but it says you were violated for not providing proof. Did you try to provide maybe like a photo or something?
No, to be perfectly honest, got the flat tire, figured out, tried to how to fix it, and get on the road as soon as possible. I was thinking, oh, crap, I'm going to violate, but I wasn't thinking how I was going to prove that I had done something, that there was a flat tire. I was just trying to hurry up and get to a place where I can get reception and check in, which I failed to do.
Okay. And what about when you corrected the situation? Like, did you go to a garage that maybe gave you a receipt that they changed the tire for you, or?
No, we changed the tire ourselves.
Okay.
Because we had a spare. It was just the time constraint it took to do everything like that. By the time I was able to get cell reception, it had passed midnight where I was required to check in that day.
Okay, thank you. And one more question for the juvenile case. I believe that's the one you're saying that you might have forgotten to include sometimes.
The fighting?
Yeah.
Yes.
But then here I'm reading, it says that you did not know you needed to disclose it. So I'm just wondering which was it? You didn't think you need to disclose it, or you forgot about it?
No, that's the one where I attempted to deceive the board.
Oh, okay.
So I had lied.
Thank you for your honesty, and thank you for clarifying.
I do, if you don't mind me just clarifying the last violation, the most recent.
Sure.
Is I did try to reach out to my probation monitor and ask to provide a subsequent test when I failed to check in. I said, I'll test today. I'll do everything I can. I'll do a blood test, a hair follicle test, whatever you want to do. And he didn't provide me the opportunity. And I just want to let you know, I tried to do everything I could, at least to make up for the missed check-in.
Okay, and just to be clear, what I intend to do once we finish with board questioning is circle back to Mr. Singh to see if there's any additional questions he may have based on your testimony so far.
Okay.
So you'll get the opportunity to clarify.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, Dr. Rogers.
Hi, Dr. Francis. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you to the board for this robust discussion. You all have asked several of the questions that I wanted to ask, so I have one more left. In the discussion about this self-report of sort of rushing through things and maybe not taking things seriously as it relates to the omissions on your application, I have one question within this packet of material. It's about the second violation. March of 2020. It's found on AGO 273, page 288 in our electronic packet. It is an email. I know you said that you've sent several emails to Mr. Gardner, but I was really puzzled about one particular statement in this email, so I'll just read it. It says, "Good evening, Curtis. I just realized that I missed my testing today. I want to be honest and say I checked in this morning and saw I had to test and completely forgot. I have no legitimate excuse for my failure to provide a specimen. I would like to ask if in any way if you're able to not violate me for this. I would appreciate your consideration of my request, and if there's anything I can do to let me know. Thank you. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the statement about asking Curtis to not violate you and what the thought process was around that.
Yeah, I knew that every violation that I incur on my record is going to limit my chances of being able to terminate early, or, like I spoke about earlier, have my license revoked completely. Revoked completely. And so I was basically asking him for some mercy or some leniency to please to not violate me regarding this. That wasn't the first time I'd asked him to not violate me. I know I've asked him prior to that in different emails to please. I didn't say have mercy, but I was covertly asking him to have mercy and not violate me.
Mhm. Can you speak to the covert nature of asking for leniency?
Yeah, I knew that you mean instead of asking directly, like, can you have mercy on me, please do
Well,
not
I
violate
think
me?
it's a question about accountability.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking about a couple of other things. We've talked about these, so I don't want to belabor it. But the driving with a suspended license, I think there was also some information in the packet about when you were in your 18-month offender program and drinking during that time. So I guess the question is this rushing through things? Is it a lapse of judgment? Is it deception? Is it an oversight? I'm just trying to get clarity around what the underlying mechanism is for asking for that, because you will have to be accountable if if you violate or you miss something because you forgot.
Of course. I would, if I'm understanding you correctly, and let me know if I'm not answering your question correctly. There's compassion. I believe we all should have compassion for each other and be compassionate of circumstances. And I was asking for compassion from Curtis during this point. I mean, I've been compassionate with my clients when they no-show for an appointment. There's a consequence. I should charge them. Sometimes I don't if the circumstances for me substantiate or validate not charging them for that fee. So I was just searching for compassion. And if he didn't have it, which he didn't in that moment, which is fine, I was willing to accept the consequence. I'm not even willing, I have to accept it. But I understand I made the mistake. And I was just saying, hey, I made a mistake. Is there any chance that you could basically let this one go? Because he had done it before. He did it with my first violation when I failed to submit my quarterly report. He said, you do this again, or you mess up again, then I'll violate you. And so basically I was saying, is there a chance that you can let this one go? Because I just knew the impact it would have on today's hearing.
Sure. Okay. That's all.
So I was not trying to be deceptive or anything like that.
All right. Thank you for your time. No more questions.
Any additional direct, Mr. Singh?
Not direct examination, no.
Any additional questions or evidence?
There's just the declarations. We're going to just be making closing arguments. Whenever we're
Okay.
ready.
Mr. Yates, you have any additional questions?
Yeah, I just have one follow-up. Just to follow up on Dr. Rogers' questions, were there any other kind of close call, maybe citations that didn't make their way into the probation report?
No, the only one that I didn't get violated right away for, and that was included subsequently after that, was the failure to submit my quarterly report in July of 2019. And then when I violated in September, he included that one on there.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
All right. Any other questions by any member of the board? All right. Hearing nothing, then we are ready to hear closing arguments. Or the closing argument.
Dr. Francis has made fundamental changes in his life since he engaged in the conduct which led to his placement on probation. his outlook, his attitude.
Can you please approach the mic a little closer? We're having a little difficulty hearing you.
Of course. Dr. Francis has made fundamental changes in his life, his outlook, and his attitude since he engaged in the conduct that led to his placement on probation. As is confirmed by his probation report and summary, which I believe is within Exhibits 12 and 13, he's in compliance with his probation program. He has addressed his violations and citation history. He has not deflected any responsibility. He has acknowledged when he was untruthful in the past. And when he participated in a psychological evaluation of his fitness back in July of 2019, I believe within 6 months of being placed on probation, he was deemed safe to practice without any additional conditions, without any limitation. Although he does have his fair share of missed check-ins and a couple failures to actually test, he has not tested positive for alcohol or any substance since he started probation in June of 2019. All of his employers, since he began probation, have been aware that he's on probation. Letters of support from his colleagues are within the petition materials. He completed the coursework required of him, including an additional ethics course. He's not suffered any arrests or convictions for more than a decade. He's long since moved past the alcohol abuse and associated behavioral concerns that plagued his early adulthood. And now, if you review those letters of support, you'll see that he's earned a reputation as a hardworking, dependable, level-headed, and thorough professional provider of psychological services. He's no longer somebody who needs to constantly check in or randomly test for the presence of alcohol in order to protect the public. I dare say he's not maintaining his sobriety for the board, but for himself, for Kelsey Francis back there, for his 2 young boys, and the career that he has worked so hard to establish, for the benefit of those who he hopes to serve in the years to come. At this point, remaining on probation, rather than protecting the public, would have a detrimental impact on the public, especially his local community up in Shasta County. And here I would like to reference particularly a portion of the letter of Paula Hinton, who was one of the bosses at the Psychiatric Care Center where Dr. Francis was initially employed when he received his probationary license. She corroborates that they were unable to credential Dr. Francis with some of the insurance companies like Blue Cross, Blue Shield, etc., limiting his opportunity to help patients in his community. And also reference the declaration, a copy of which will be provided to all of the board members, of his business partner and licensed clinical social worker, Stacy Bertagna, who again corroborates that his probationary status does not allow him to serve veterans and first responders, groups whom, if you look at the website of Drew's Place, you'll see Dr. Francis would most like to provide his services to. I would also like to highlight findings from the April 2021 psychological evaluation of Dr. Francis's fitness undertaken by licensed psychologist Dr. Eugene Roeder, which is included as Exhibit 8 in the exhibits before the board members. Therein, Dr. Roeder finds that the results of Dr. Francis's evaluation confirm that his criminal behavior, which occurred between the ages of 21 and 26, was all directly associated with his substance use disorder, rather than being evidence of an underlying antisocial or other personality disorder. And that the testing confirms that he would be a particularly appropriate candidate for termination of his probation, as his difficulties and challenges be they categorical or clinical, are limited to that disorder. A disorder which he found was past the level which would be described as being in remission. In addition, Dr. Roeder found that Dr. Francis does not present any behavioral issues which would place him at risk of potential harm to a future client, and that he has a positive prognosis for future success of his sobriety with or without the board's probation. It's also particularly noteworthy that the board-ordered psychological evaluation undertaken by Dr. Cyrus Moazam and part of Exhibit 13 found his substance use disorder to be in full remission, and that the active period of that disorder occurred pre-2010. I think the ironic part about his probationary order is there's no aspect of it that relates to monitoring for deceit or a failure to disclose. It's an alcohol monitoring agreement at this point. That's all it is. It would be a different case if additional conditions were added after Dr. Moazam's psychological evaluation, but they weren't. And he's long since established that sobriety and demonstrated here today that his incentives for maintaining that sobriety are bigger than what we're doing here today. He's only here today and able to be the person that he is and earn the reputation that he's earned because of his sobriety. There is little to no risk that he'll ever throw that away. There's nothing further to be gained by keeping Dr. Francis on probation. As confirmed by his narrative statement, which I urge you all to read, his wife's letter of support, Dr. Roeder's evaluation, all of his evidence confirms that he's maintained his sobriety since March of 2017. And even then, that was a glass of champagne during a toast at his wedding. And as he was able to achieve sobriety through his own efforts, prior to the board's check-ins and testing requirements, the board should be assured that there will be no recurrence of the events which led to his placement on probation, and that he should be released so he can help the kids in his community that he sees himself in. Kids that want hope, need hope. Kids who think that they can't become somebody like Dr. Francis, can't become a licensed professional because all they see is fighting every day, abusive parents, drug abuse. He's evidence that it doesn't always have to be that way. So he's particularly equipped to work with those kids. And whether it happens today or when the decision is issued, that his probation is terminated and he can start contracting with insurance panels to begin that work, or whether it happens after he ends his probationary term, he's going to do that work. All we ask is that he be allowed to do that now rather than 3.5 years in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. That concludes this petition hearing. The record will remain open through the end of the day pending receipt of...
Sorry to interrupt, Your Honor. I believe we have to make a recommendation.
Oh, you may make one.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Sure. My apologies.
Dr. Francis has made some incredible life changes over the past few years, but there are significant concerns that the people have regarding whether the board should terminate probation. Particularly, I feel there was a lack of discussion regarding the underlying misconduct which brought us here today. And I'm not talking really about the actual arrests, which in themselves are cause for probation. These did mainly happen a decade ago, but I believe petitioner has really sufficiently explained how those occurred and why he believes they will not reoccur. What I'm talking about are the acts of dishonesty and the omissions in those two applications. I do not believe the reasons why those occurred were sufficiently addressed. The one other issue that I have is that of the citations, instances of noncompliance that occurred during probation. Based on my review of the materials, similar misconduct often results in no license being issued in the first place. And I think that goes to the importance of second chances. Dr. Francis has worked really hard and he's earned a second chance. But the board also took a chance. They gave him that chance, and part of that insurance is a probationary period. He agreed to a probationary term of 7 years, which was effective June 2019. So probation would complete somewhere around June 2026. This is something that both parties agreed to. So we're here today. We're about halfway through the 7 years, and we're talking about ending probation early. I don't disagree that in instances of exceptional performance, probation should be ended early, but I don't believe that's the case here. We're talking about a generally good probationary term, and there's a history of that, but there are just some instances where Dr. Francis failed to perform, particularly where there have been some citations. And that's what the people have issue with here. He has, in fact, received some favorable psych evals, but those reviewers, they're not really responsible to the public. Dr. Francis, and also please don't get discouraged by these comments. You have made some big strides and life improvements, and based on your statements and your letters of recommendation, you've been doing some great work for your community. If you continue on this path, I have no doubt that you will sooner rather than later have an unrestricted license. But based on all of the above, my office believes that it is in everyone's best interest that the petitioner remain on a probation for the duration of the period. And that's to ensure protection of the public, and so therefore we recommend that probation be denied. However, if the board disagrees with this recommendation of my office, then we urge that the probation remain in place, but maybe certain terms be alleviated to help Dr. Francis out on his journey. I will leave that to the discretion of the board if the board chooses to go that route. And with that, we conclude. Thank you.
All right, thank you, counsel. And with that said, the record is closed. The record will remain open to the end of the day. The hearing has concluded. Mr. Singh, yes?
I just want to make sure, how do you want those delivered to you electronically? You want me to have them dropped off here?
I don't know if we need that on the record. I think we can work that out off the record because my office would like them as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. The board will meet in closed session to discuss disciplinary matters, including petitions for reinstatement, modification, or early termination, proposed decisions, stipulations, petitions for reconsideration, and remands. We will resume open session at 1:30 and hear our next petition hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.